Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 50. That's 50 if you can believe it. Recorded March 2021. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan, we hear their Trek story, and we try to figure out why people love this show so much. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 50. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfiles. And here's a spoiler warning. As we record this, we have reached the end of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed in this episode. You have been warned, humans. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the traditionally tolerant, thoughtfully touchy, yet never tautological M5 Multitronic unit. Say hello to everyone, M5.
M5 standing by. All functions within acceptable parameters.
Let's see the announcements, M5.
Working.
If you are listening to this and you are not subscribed, you should do that. It is the best way to support the show. We are on all the major platforms, so pick your favorite and subscribe, and please have at it. It really helps us out so much and helps other fans like you find what we do here at Trek Profiles. Thank you so much. There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of the episode. There's actually quite a lot of it in this particular episode. They will come after the ending audio cards. My guest in this one was particularly interested in politics and government, so we had a little diversion about that, so I put that in there in the bonus stuff. We also had a very lengthy and deep dive into the mechanics of Star Trek Online and how it compares to an MMO that I play, so we had a lot to talk about there. I thought it was maybe a little too much in the weeds for the main body of the show, but I left it in the bonus material if you're interested. So enjoy it, or not, as you choose. Let's do the Kobayashi Maru feedback from episode 47 with Diane Carey. Which warp nacelle is best, port or starboard? Diane said starboard, but the fans said the port nacelle is best nacelle by 55 to 45%. You've got a bad case of Carillion fever. Are you going to go see Dr. Bashir or Dr. Culber? Diane said Dr. Bashir, and so did everyone in the Twitter poll by 74 to 26%. Who is more handsome, Lore or Data? Diane said Lore, but in a surprising result, in the Twitter poll, Data was absolutely commandingly victorious by 82 to 18% over his absolutely physically identical twin brother, Lore. So there you have that one. Which of these two places will be your next vacation destination? Galorndon Core or Ditalics B? The glorious weather systems of Galorndon Core were just so appealing that it won by 54 to 46%, but Diane had selected Ditalics B. C'est la vie. And finally, who's stealing your stuff? Grubby Ferengi traders or spies? Romulan spies. Diane said Romulan spies, of course, and so did all of you in the Twitter poll by 64 to 36%. Now, did you enjoy those questions? Because I have opened it up for listeners just like you to contribute your own Kobayashi Maru questions to the show. And if you get a question on the show, you'll get a credit on the relevant show page over at TrekProfiles.com and also a shout out at the end of the episode. Maybe there will be some listeners credited in this very episode. Listen to the end and find out who. Okay, a little feedback note. I got an email from friend of the pod, Sandy. Hi, Sandy. And she's been really wonderful about sharing her thoughts with me about the show and has sent me all kinds of interesting feedback and other things, and it's really helped me out so much. So, first of all, thank you, Sandy, for sending all that stuff in. And Sandy is contemplating starting her own podcast and actually asked me to describe how I make Trek profiles. So, a couple things. One, I'm self-taught on this stuff, so I'm no authority on it at all, and no one should listen to me on any topic whatsoever, but especially that. And second, I'm not going to clutter up the show with a technical diversion that's barely interesting even to me, much less the majority of you. So, Sandra, here's what I'm going to do. I am actually going to write this up at some point and put it on the website. And if people are interested, you can have it there. I'll post links on the social medias whenever I get that done, whenever I get around to it, which might not be soon, but I will post it. So that's that. In the meantime, Sandra, please keep it up. And anybody else, you have thoughts, questions, suggestions, or you just want to say hi, Always email me, feedback@TrekProfiles.com, or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. That's going to do it for messages, communiques, news, and weather. Let's move on. M5, let's run the profile for this week's guest, and let's start the show.
Activating show transmission.
Her favorite character is Tilly, but she also loves that Romulan cloaking device advisor Torul, and her favorite ship is the Odyssey class, USS Enterprise F, and she's currently rewatching Star Trek Picard, currently on Maps and Legends. Maybe she has an update for us, we'll find out soon. She's from New Mexico Sector in North America Earth in Sector 001. You can find her on the Twitter @RuinFane. It's Alex Shomaker. Welcome, Alex, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey!
Alex, it is time for question 1. The M5 is very strict that I always ask this question straight off the bat. Are you a Star Trek fan?
Absolutely. I am a huge Star Trek fan.
And how did you get into the Star Trek fandom?
Oh, it is such a... Well, it's a short story in the beginning, but it's been so long. That's really an awful answer, but
it's been a long road.
It's been a long road getting from there to here. Well, really, it was on my whole childhood. My mom, especially, both my parents, but my mom especially, were big Trekkies. But I really didn't start watching it until after the 2009 movie. I think I was a freshman I was a freshman in high school at that point, and my mom thought, with this coming out, it's like contemporizing the original series, and she figured it would be really important for me to experience the Star Trek story, formally, not just through osmosis, so I can understand the cultural relevance. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool, and I really enjoyed it in the theater. And I think right after I got home from watching it, I started watching the original series. And
oh goodness,
there was
what is that even like?
Poor 14-year-old me was pretty shocked. I was making it through the cage, and I was like, "This is Star Trek." After what I just saw, but I stuck with it. I kept watching the original series, and I definitely felt more of a connection once I hit Next Gen. I appreciate the original series, don't get me wrong, but I much prefer the later series. And when I was watching Next Gen, I hadn't even finished, I think, gosh, what season is Unification in? Is that season 3? Do you recall?
Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head, but
okay.
It's right there in the middle.
Yeah, so I wasn't even through Next Gen when I started playing Star Trek Online. I didn't really have much time to watch Star Trek through high school. I watched the original series, and I was like, okay, and I watched episodes of Next Gen here and there, but when I graduated from high school, I finally had that time to finally watch it, and I remember seeing ads for Star Trek Online, and I thought, gosh, well, I'm one of those people who, when they watch a new show or a new fiction show or movie, they make like original characters in their head. Like, how would I insert myself into this universe, or how would I insert a new character into this universe? And I
sounds
thought,
like fanfic.
Yeah, basically. And I was like, wow, I could make this Vulcan character that I had in my head. I could make her in Star Trek Online. I think that would be really cool. I didn't even know when I was downloading the game that it was a massively multiplayer online roleplay game that, you're playing with other people. I thought that, the NPCs, the non-player characters, were just programmed to stand on the Admiral's desk. Wow, that's weird. I don't know why that's happening, but okay. And then I realized that was another person. But,
so, am I assuming that you weren't much of a gamer before STO?
Not really. I mean, I enjoyed games, but it wasn't a huge thing that I did with my time. I played Pokemon throughout my entire childhood, but not to the point that I'd be like joining competitions and stuff like that. It was just a casual thing, and Star Trek Online was that for me for a long time, but after 7 years, it's not really a casual thing anymore. I think the summer that I started playing it, it was the 2014. That's when I really started picking up watching Next Gen. Finally got into Deep Space Nine when I started college that fall. And so I was basically experiencing Star Trek Online, which goes on through all kinds of Star Trek canon and all kinds of episodes later on, like even into Enterprise. I had no idea what they were doing, what they were talking about, but I just went with it. And it was like I understood the references after the fact once I got to those episodes in Next Gen. So I had kind of a non-traditional Star Trek experience that way.
I don't think there is such a thing as a traditional experience, to be honest with you. I've interviewed so many people about how they got into the show, and it really can take a lot of routes. So I want to go back to something you had mentioned, which was the 2009 was your introduction really to Star Trek, even though you knew about it, obviously. I mean, growing up in the United States, you can't sort of not be aware of Star Trek generally, right? It's just sort of out there in the culture. But I was getting into this conversation because I had recently watched my very first James Bond film.
Uh-huh.
And I had never seen James Bond before. And I had a previous guest on who was like, what's wrong with you, basically? Like, you have to watch James Bond. So I said to him, give me one film to watch, like just one. Don't give me any, like, don't tell me like you got to watch this, then that, then this. I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Just give me one. And so we had this whole discussion and there were some Bond people that had some very strong reactions, and they said that was definitely the wrong film, and it's not the best film and, all this. But his point of view, and I'm going to bring it back to Star Trek in a minute, was that if you'd never seen Bond and if you just want one film to sort of understand what it's like, the film to watch is Casino Royale. Because it's this modern film that sort of gives you the modern perspective. It doesn't have any baggage. There's no prior knowledge of anything. And you can just go and watch it and understand James Bond and you'll be fine. The discussion we were having online, I don't know if you even saw this, but it was really around what's the equivalent of that in Star Trek. And some people were saying that 2009 would be the film to recommend to people. Even though I think typically it's, considering the 800 hours of Star Trek that are out there, it's probably not very representative of a lot of that.
No, I don't think it would be. Now that I've seen all 800 plus hours, I agree.
So what would you recommend out of all the Star Trek you've seen?
Oh, gosh.
If you were to pick one thing for people to watch, what would it be? Someone who's never seen Star Trek before.
Gosh, that's a really tough question. Because even though I feel like 2009 isn't representative of all previous Star Trek, I feel like it is a good gateway. Since the reasoning why my mom introduced it to me is like all those themes from the original series and Next Gen to an extent are, and are presented in a contemporary setting. It's a little more relevant to a modern audience. Part of why watching the original series as a 14-year-old was kind of shocking. Or a 14-year-old in the 21st century, I should say.
Sure.
But dang, I'm not sure what you could recommend.
All right. Well, you have a think on it. Maybe we can come back to this.
Yeah, because I don't know.
Okay, so your mom introduced you to Star Trek. Was she a convention goer?
She was, actually, and that actually led to my very first piece of merch.
Tell me.
She went to STLV when, I think before I was born and when I was, really little. I never went with her because I can't imagine taking a baby with you to a convention is terribly fun.
I've seen parents with younger kids, not babies, but definitely younger kids. I remember this one a family that was even doing a cosplay. I mean, they were dressed up as Mr. Spock, T'Pring, and they had the younger kids. They were pulling in a cart with little ears and the Vulcan mop haircuts. I mean, it was really cute.
That's so cute.
I want to say that they were like 4 and 6. So they were little kids, but not babies.
Not babies. Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess when you're a convention goer in the 90s, you obviously don't really have Twitter or anything to keep in contact with people you meet. She had pen pals, And from what I understand, she was writing to these pen pals around the time I was born.
Oh, wow.
And one of them sent a Guinan figurine to her for me as like a baby shower gift. So,
oh my goodness.
And I've probably seen it. It was a long time ago. There's a whole bunch of merch that she has that I haven't seen because it's too much work to get into that right now. Literally get into the box.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a Guinan figurine that I haven't seen in who knows how long.
All right, so we got a couple things to talk about here. First of all, have you ever been to a convention, Sci-Fi or Star Trek?
I've always wanted to go. The closest I've come, though, is a local Comic-Con. I went one year, and there was some Star Trek stuff. Like, I think one of the women who won Miss Klingon, like the Miss Klingon pageant, she was there, and I got to meet her. And I found some, like, super cheap figurines that I bought. Like, I have a Picard figurine above me on my desk. He's got yellow lips, and he was on sale for like $2, and I was like, yeah, that's mine now.
Perfect.
But I've always wanted to go to STLV, and I had a big plan to go in 2020, and obviously that didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping 2021 on, hopefully I can go to at least one. I'm not a huge crowd person, but with the pandemic, I'm kind of craving that reminder for why I hate crowds.
You know, there's something to be said for the convention experience because you're surrounded by all of these other people. That's true. But the fact is, they're all people just like you.
Yeah.
And so, you know, sometimes I've had people like on Twitter or in some of these Facebook groups, they'll say things like, oh, but, you know, if I wear this uniform, is someone going to say something? And it's like, honey, no. Like, you know, I hate to sound like this, you know, but like people are going to be like, that is so freaking cool. Like everybody is in the club.
Yeah.
Nobody spends thousands of dollars to go to a convention to hate on it.
Yeah.
You know, right? I mean, the reason there's haters on social media is because the cost is free.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly true.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to go fly to this other city and buy a ticket and spend all this money to stay in a hotel room to be a jerk. No. People are there to celebrate you. So if you make it to, what is it called now? 55-year mission or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
hit me up and I'll definitely owe you an Altair water or a Romulan ale or whatever, because that's what you get for being on the show.
Awesome.
So you bought some figurines. Do you collect anything else?
Not really. I would like to get into buying the Hero Collector Eagle Moss starships. I don't have space. That's kind of a big factor. I bought the Shunjo, I think last year or 2 years ago. It's on my desk at work because I do have space there, but I don't really have a formal collection. Closest I have is I've got 3 figurines. I've got Dax, Kira, and Picard. They're all up on my desk. They're still holding Christmas ornaments, as I'm now realizing. Probably need to take care of that now that it's March. I also have some game print ships. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Star Trek Online is partnered with a company called Gameprint, where you can upload a 3D model of your ship and have it 3D printed.
Oh, okay.
And so I've got a couple, like I've got my favorite ship right here, which is the Baran class. But and I would totally get more if I had the income to support that and the space.
So you got to take a picture of that and send it to me, and I will put that up on the show notes page up at TrekProfiles.
I'll put it down here so I don't forget.
Yeah, I'll remind you definitely, because when I make the show notes, I'll come to this part and I'll be, if I don't have the photo, I'll be like, what's going on? So
okay,
so
yeah, because I won't remember.
I want to talk more about STO in a little bit, but I just want to understand this one point. So you can design your own ships.
Yes.
Is that right?
So it doesn't have to have
it doesn't have to have a canonical basis.
Not necessarily. No. You have limited freedom to design your ships. So, let me see. I think a good example would be,
The one from Voyager where it separates and it has multi-vector attack mode?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. The Prometheus. Yeah, thank you. I'm totally blanking. The Prometheus is a good example. So you can fly the Prometheus in game. You can have it look as canonically screen accurate as you want, or you can mix parts around. Because I believe that the developers have made their own like refits and updates to some ship models. Like the Prometheus ends up, I believe they updated it to be the Hestia, if I'm not mistaken. And they have some others like the Cerberus and the Hephaestus, I think. They've all got different parts. And so if you wanted to use like the nacelles from the Prometheus and the Hestia pylons, as long as you own both the Hestia and the Prometheus, you can mix and match those parts around, and we call that kit bashing. I'm sure you've heard that term elsewhere. Well,
that's a term that exists way outside of gaming, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to understand the parameters of this. So can I buy like a Galaxy-class starship and put like the Constitution-class original TOS series nacelles on it? I mean, is that how this works?
You can't, unfortunately. I think a lot of people wish they could do that. They could just make their own like totally wacko ships with different parts, but I think every time the developers make a ship, they have to program in these customizations. Mm-hmm. And so it's easy to do that within classes because, you know, they've got similar geometry, they've got similar pylons, similar nacelles. But if you were to go from, you know, that big jump from the Galaxy to the Constitution from the original series, that's not, unfortunately not a combination you can make.
Oh, well, I think that'd be wild, but
it would be. I'd like to see that, but I can't make it in games, sadly.
So if I understand it right, though, whatever combination you can legally make in game, if you want the model of it, you can get it.
Yes, there are some limitations because Eagle Moss prints like. They're printing a lot of the Constitution, the Discovery era ships. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can print like the Cardenas class. I don't think you can print that. I printed my Baran class, which is the update to the Cardenas, and I don't think you can print it anymore because now Eagle Moss is also printing the Baran. So there are some limitations there. And then
it's probably licensing, I would think. Like there's probably rules in the contracts about that.
Yeah. And then if there are some ships in the game, like there's a lot of alien ships, and a lot of people like to game print their alien ships because Eagle Moss might not make them. And those, sometimes they have little floating parts, kind of like the 32nd century ships. Mm-hmm. That's not, you can't really print those.
No, it probably doesn't look right. Yeah, you have to have you'd have to have a custom built stand to like hold the floaty parts off to the side.
Yeah, you're best off making your own 3D model and printing it yourself, because I don't think GamePrint wants to even go there.
So let's finish up on this collections bit. I want to know what is the favorite piece of Star Trek merch that you own, whatever it is. You're
gonna laugh at me, and I'm trying to see if I. Can you give me 1 sec? I want to see if I can pull this and show it to you.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, I haven't really looked at this in a long time. It's kind of dusty, but I have Star Trek Generations tissue paper. It got a little mangled on the corner, but it's still in pretty good condition.
Now, that's not tissue paper like for blowing your nose. It's like for wrapping gifts.
Yes, it goes in gifts and things like that. I want to say that it came from something that my mom bought, not at STLV, but the Hilton, I think, when they were still doing that Star Trek Experience.
The Star Trek Experience, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what this is from. I think there's a few other sheets, but this is the one that I've been hanging on to.
It looks like it has the TNG Delta badge on it.
Yes, from Generations.
Yes, okay. It's got the Delta badge in gold. It's white paper with little gold Delta badges on it. Yeah, That's nice. So
it's just so out of left field.
What do you do with this tissue paper? I mean, do you just like frame it or like
I want to do something with it. I don't know what though, because I can't imagine they still print this. So
certainly not.
Whatever I do with it, if it's permanent, I'd better like it. So it's been sitting on my shelf, and I haven't really known what to do with it. I want to do something, but I'm not sure what. It's like getting a tattoo or something,
Yeah, for sure. Inspiration will strike you, and it'll happen. It'll happen. That's great.
I'll make a Star Trek shadow box or something, and this will be the background.
So one other question about the convention experience before we put a button on that, which is that when you go, is it going to be a mom-daughter trip, or are you going to go solo?
Oh gosh, I'm not too sure. I think my mom's not as big of a Trek fan as she used to be. Sometimes she refers to me as a Trek monster. She's like, "What have I done?" So I think she would go with me though because I've never traveled alone before. I'm your typical grad student who still lives at home because it's cheap. So It's like, I would like to try going alone because I've got plenty of friends that I think I'd like to, hang out with. But, going to Las Vegas alone, especially as a young woman, that's a little not something I'd like to do. Not right now. Yeah. So we'll see.
I understand. One thing I would recommend is if you go over to our friends at the Tricorder Transmissions, which is a Star Trek podcast network, they have a show called Shore Leave, which is all about conventions.
I think I've listened to an episode, one of the ones that Heather was on. They were talking all about STLV.
Yeah, it's well, there's actually an STLV 101. Like a series, and so there's 3 of them, 3 episodes.
I think I listened to one.
Yeah, I was on one of those.
Okay, cool.
Because I live here, so they wanted like a local one, so they could be like, okay, where do you go to the grocery store, and like, like they wanted sort of the local perspective on things.
That's helpful.
It's a really good resource, and also like to save money because some people have like dietary stuff and things like that, or they can't. They just want to get the hell out of the hotel.
Yeah, that's me.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really weird because you can literally go to SDLV and like not leave the hotel. And,
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah. And, sometimes people will say things, especially people who haven't been out here, and they'll be like, oh, well, this other thing is like right across the highway. Yeah, it's right across the highway. It's also 115 degrees.
Yeah.
And like, you are probably not going to want to do that walk, and so.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit different once you get out here, and the definition of what is right next door takes on a whole new meaning.
Oh yeah, I haven't been to Las Vegas in a long time, but I have been to Laughlin more recently, and I mean, God, I went there in July, and I was walking on asphalt. I would like to not repeat that experience.
Oh yeah, you could fry an egg on that. Yeah. Oh. And for those who are listening to this, Laughlin is at that extreme southern pointy end of Nevada, where it like juts into right between Arizona and California. It's pretty much as far south as you can go.
Oh yeah.
So wow, that's wild. So okay, so as we sit here in early 2021, Alex, have you seen all the 800 and something hours of Star Trek?
Yes, I have. Well, actually, that's a lie. I still have not seen First Contact.
What?
Yeah.
What is that about?
I just realized recently I haven't seen it yet. I think it's because Netflix, they would put the movie on and then take it off, and they're on Paramount Plus now, aren't they? Or wasn't there some new agreement that the movies could be on there?
I'm not sure because I have them all. I have all the movies on Blu-ray or DVD.
Nice.
So I've not looked. I've not looked, but I mean it's widely available. I think on several different services. I don't know if it's on Paramount Plus, but
I'll have to look.
Definitely, yeah. I mean that's like core canon Star Trek.
I know. Well, now I'm not. Was it Insurrection? No, it's Insurrection that I haven't seen. I'm sorry. My brain's horrible. I think it's Insurrection that I haven't seen. I think I have seen First Contact. That's the one where they go back in time, right? And
yes.
There's the board. Yeah, okay. Then it's Insurrection that I haven't seen. Yeah. I'll have to.
Oh goodness! Well, it's definitely an interesting film. And you should definitely check it out because there's no reason not to be a completist. But it's sometimes, I mean, people hold off on episodes for other reasons. So I was just curious if there was some particular reason that you were holding it off.
I've seen every episode at least once, and I've seen most of the movies at least once, just save for Insurrection.
Very good, very good. You ever done a cosplay?
Not like of an actual character, but I do have uniforms.
And which one's your favorite?
I'm really loving the Discovery era Constitution uniforms. I guess those are going to be the Strange New Worlds uniforms now.
Yeah.
I've got a Command Gold uniform and I love it. I'd like to get it tailored so it actually like fits me properly. It's not that, very obviously I bought this online for like $20. I don't know if that's how much I paid for it, but I like that tailored look.
Did you get like the scant or did you get like the jacket and the pants?
It's the jacket and a skirt. And I had to find my own boots, and that's harder than I thought it would be.
There's not ones that are exactly right.
No. And, there's the cosplay boots, but I maybe it's because my last name, it's Shoemaker, but it's spelled really weirdly. I always tell people that I'm cursed with shoes. I can't wear just any shoes that I want because they will hurt my feet. I will get blisters and horrible pain. So I can't just like say, oh, look, cosplay boots. I'll just buy those and just magically put them on. So that's something I'd like to work on. If I do go to a convention, I'd like to wear that uniform, but I've got to get better boots. I'm self-conscious about the ones I've got.
Well, the one thing I would say, particularly about wearing a cosplay at a convention, is that the number of steps you have to walk in a day is vast. I mean, even at the Rio in Vegas where they used to hold STLV, you will easily bust, 15, 20,000 steps in a day, if you're busy. Yeah. And if you're doing a cosplay, I mean, the whole point of wearing a cosplay is to get noticed, right? No one puts on all that stuff to be ignored, right? Yeah. And so you're walking around and you're, going to all the things. And if you're wearing shoes that are going to hurt your feet, you are going to be hating it. I mean,
There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, I've done things where I've had my whole head done in makeup.
Wow.
Because I have a shaved head. Yeah, I post pictures every once in a while, but I've had my whole head done, and like I just can't take it after a while. I just have to get out of it, And so I like, even though it looks great, after like 3, 4, 5 hours, I'm like, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah. I think I definitely I would like to wear that costume, but there's no way I'd want to do it all day, especially not all weekend. I mean, especially with that heat. No.
Well, if you're inside the hotel, it's not a problem. If you're inside the hotel, it's
still
that's what makes it easy. And typically, like most people, if you're going to go all out on a cosplay, you just go for the one day. I mean, you can go for the whole convention, but you just wear the really involved stuff. Just wear it on that Saturday. Yeah. That's usually the cosplay day, is the Saturday day at the convention for your big stuff.
Yeah.
If you got easy stuff, you can do that the other days.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I've noticed is, because we're mutuals on Twitter, I've been following your tweets for quite a while, is that you have a very heavy sort of Romulan fandom going on.
I do.
Yeah, what's the genesis of this, and what really drew you to the Romulans?
You know what? It's Star Trek Online, and I never thought I liked Romulans before. I thought they were underdeveloped and
completely agree.
Two-dimensional. I was really disappointed in that. But I didn't realize that disappointment until I played Star Trek Online, because I think a year or two before I started playing, they had a huge release where you could play as a Romulan character. They had their own tutorial, their own missions that, you can't play as a Starfleet or Klingon character. You can only play them as a Romulan, and that takes a lot of work for the developers to make, so you don't get those very often.
Right.
You do eventually have to ally with the Federation or the Klingon Defense Force, and then you get their missions. But for the most part, you start out playing as a Romulan refugee after Hobus, and you're on a planet called Virenat, and you're just minding your own business. You're like farmers in space.
Yeah, I remember I actually played this, and
yeah.
I remembered one of the first missions is to like clear bugs out of like the agricultural area, and so that's like, you know, all right, I'm going to play Star Trek Online, man. This is exciting. All right, go kill some bugs that are, you know, infecting the crops, and I'm like, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I've had so many friends joke like, "Oh, you like Romulans, so you're a farmer?" And, you know, it goes on. Like, I don't know how far you made it past that bug killing mission.
All the way to the Kittimer meeting.
Oh, okay. So you know that, you know, the planet gets attacked.
Yep.
You end up losing that planet. You get your ship. You become a de facto captain of your own ship. And then you join the Romulan Republic, which it's a huge expansion on Unification Parts 1 and 2 from Next Gen. And I think that's why I remember Unification so well when I finally watched it, because I didn't know they tied that back. I had already been playing a Romulan, and I made it well through the early Romulan missions by the time I made it to watch Unification, and then everything suddenly made more sense.
It all made sense. Yeah, absolutely. So it was really strange for me because I've been a gamer, not hardcore, but a gamer my whole life pretty much.
Nice.
And I started playing an MMO back in 1999, probably the first really big popular one way back when was called Everquest.
Oh, okay.
And it goes back to March of 99 is when it came out. Yeah. Wow. And it's still there. Like they just came out with a new expansion. I mean, it's still going. So yeah, I was one of the first people to be playing the game, and I played it all the way up and the game was very punishing. Oh. It had a lot of requirements in how you had to play. Oh. And if you made a mistake, like, it hurt. You know, it wasn't like a casual game, you know, and it really demanded that you play with other players, which I think is one of the reasons it has longevity.
That's probably true.
And one of the things that I found weird about Star Trek Online, and I'll be curious for your reaction about this, is that it felt like a single player game.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through like hours and hours of playtime, and I don't think I came across any other people in the game. Nor was I required to talk to anyone, nor would I even know how to. I felt like I was playing a single player game, and I didn't feel like it was massive or multiplayer or online. It felt like just a local game I had installed off downloaded, off of Steam. It was very weird to me coming from that other MMO universe, and it was quite jarring. I didn't like it.
I think that's why I stayed playing. Personally, that heavy emphasis on being able to play alone, because like we covered earlier, I was never really a huge MMO player before, and I didn't even know I was playing with other people until, you know, maybe my first 24 hours in the game. And I was going through the HUD settings to see like the labels you could put on NPCs, and I said, other players. And I turned on other players' names, and I was like, oh, okay, I see. And I think I kind of took a little step back from it after that, because, you know, I grew up early internet days, like, don't tell strangers your name, don't talk to strangers online. Now I have a Twitter account with 1,000 followers. But,
and you're talking to a stranger online.
Yeah. But, you know, it was very jarring to me. But I stuck with it, I think, because I was able to play those missions, and there was no detraction from the missions because I was playing alone. And I've played a lot of the story missions with friends. Like, if I'm helping a friend who's leveling up a new character, sometimes they just want to play with other people. And sometimes people from MMO backgrounds like your own, they don't feel comfortable playing alone. They feel like they've got to have someone around. And I feel like the story missions...
that's how I feel.
I feel like they don't run as well to me when you're running them with other people. Because it's like... You know, you've got two fleet admirals running around.
Right.
But I think it took me about a year in game to actually start playing with other people because I was terrified and I was not good at the game at all. I'm sure you're well aware of the technical difficulties of, understanding ship builds and skills and all of that.
I never got into any of that. That was like, because what happened with me was I actually made a choice at one point, the branching stories, and whatever choice I had made, I'd rolled a Romulan engineer. That was the character I'd started with.
Nice.
And whatever choice I'd made, it put me in a position where something was bugged and I couldn't progress.
Oh no.
And there was like no option I could do. Like it told me to do a thing that I couldn't do. And I was like, I forget what they call the help system, but I requested help and I didn't get it. So finally I logged out of it. When I'd logged back in like months later, like it had said like this thing had been fixed, so like this whole thing there had been a bug in that mission or whatever it was I was on. So I could now progress. And so then I went on. One of the things though that is a little weird, and I don't quite understand this, is that the game sort of mixes all the different eras together into this giant melting pot. And I find it weird. So I rolled up a second character, which was like a TOS Andorian.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a Starfleet guy, and I'm playing him in the game at the same time that my Romulan engineer TNG era is in the game. So I don't really understand how all this works.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. And this has been the source of some really recent and some really, I don't know if inflammatory is the right word, discourse.
Okay.
Because just in the last week or so, Star Trek Online announced or released the Janeway class, which is that Voyager J that we saw in Discovery Season 3, and they added it to Earth Space Dock. You can see it within the space dock itself when you go down to the shipyard. Mm-hmm. And it had replaced the Titan class, which was the update to the USS Titan, like Riker flies, or captains rather. There's a lot of debate over whether a 32nd century ship that canonically, that era, time travel is outlawed. And so a lot of people are saying, we shouldn't have that ship in the game. It shouldn't even be there if it's going to be in the game. And other people are totally fine with it because Star Trek Online is kind of like a sandbox or a playground, I guess you could say. I even would see it as like an amusement park. Okay. There's, you've got your original series section where, you play as an original series character in that era, but, through time shenanigans, you make it into 2410, the 25th century. And they do that with the Discovery era captains as well. They'll just chuck you into the future for whatever reason, but really, it's so they don't have to build a whole new game that's in that era, because that would be incredible amounts of work involved. So they just find ways to make that work. Have all these eras come together. I kind of see it as time travel without too many questions.
Okay. Don't look at it too hard. Yeah, just don't. It's a game. I mean, I feel like if you consider it hard canon, you're going to be disappointed. There's no way around that, unfortunately. So, because I mean, I've encountered this myself where I want to have a captain that kind of has a realistic backstory, and I'm sure you're familiar. You just kind of become a captain like as soon as you start playing, and it's like that doesn't feel right. And all these wars, all these huge things. Didn't you watch 2009? It absolutely happens. Not that often, though. It's not every captain just has their other captain die, and Starfleet says, "Oh yeah, take the ship. You'll be fine." So, if you look at all the conflicts and the wars and terrible things that have happened in the Star Trek Online universe, and you realize, wait, we started in 2409. It's just now 2410. We've been through like what? 3 or 4 galactic wars by now. A lot of like the hardcore role players, they will actually use an extended or a modified time period. They'll add like 30 or even 200 years onto the Star Trek Online year, so it
makes a little more sense.
Okay,
so
okay.
That's another thing. You just can't think too much about it. You just
All right.
gotta vibe with it.
I don't want to be too hung up on this, but I one other question, and then we'll move on to something else, which is if I'm playing like a TOS era guy and I've got my Constitution class ship, what possible hope do I have of fighting a Vorcha class cruiser from like the 24th century Klingon era vessel? I mean, how does that even work?
I think the premise that they kind of rely on is when your original series character gets sent to 2409, the ship maintains its structural integrity from the era that it comes from. So if it was like brand new, fresh out of space dock before this temporal anomaly, it's still going to be in pretty good working condition. But obviously, going up against future technology is going to be a bit of an issue. That's not really addressed from what I can remember. I think they have some explanations here and there, but you're encouraged to get new ships that are era appropriate. And so it's, you could get refits or, go completely new, just jump into a new ship class or something. Part of that is like, if you get a Constitution class in your original series character, that's like a tier 1 starship. And I'm sure you're familiar. It goes from tier 1 all the way up to tier 6, which is the highest level. You can only fly like tier 6 ships as a level 60 character, if I'm correct, or level 50. So that kind of illustrates the progression from a lower tier ship, an older ship, to, upgrading the technology and, bringing it into line with everything that's going on in the galaxy, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, sure. So what was it that I think we sort of lost the thread there? What was it about the Romulans that particularly attracted you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. We went on a big tangent there, I guess.
No, that's okay. We do that here. It's fine.
Well, after I realized, I was playing those Romulan missions, and I was realizing, wow, Romulans really got the short end of the stick in the show, because the game does a really good job of giving them extra dimensions. Like, and this actually kind of goes into, is his name pronounced Shaban? Michael Chabon? Chabon, yes, thank you.
Yeah, because as we record this, he recently published a whole treatise about the Romulans on Medium.
Yes, and that's what I was going to kind of touch on, because,
Yeah, go for it.
That was, if you look at Romulans only from the canon of Star Trek, only as they appear in the shows and movies, they're hardly visited. But there's a lot of beta canon out there, like Diane Duane and her Rihansu series. That was a big novel series that I read after playing my Romulan character.
I've read it.
Yeah, it's good. And
no, it's excellent.
She does a great job of, I don't want to say humanizing the Romulans. They're more Romulanized, I guess. Yeah. They're given more dimension. You understand the culture. There's, explanations for why they are the way they are. Beyond, saying their personality is secrecy. They're all paranoid. They're this monolith. They're not. And I think that's one thing that Trek kind of struggles with, is making alien species kind of like monoliths. Like, the whole planet speaks one language and has one religion and one culture, and Romulans are no exception to that. And so when you go to Chabon's stuff, this treatise that he made, I feel like it kind of unfairly lumps all these Romulans into this, they're all paranoid and secret, and that's why their government is paranoid and secret. I feel like it kind of conflates culture and government. And as a political science graduate and public policy student, I'm looking at that and I'm like, that's not true at all. So I guess that's kind of where I struggle with it. It's still very one-dimensional, still very monolithic. It's disappointing. And that's why I really rely on Star Trek Online for my Romulan stuff, because you see there that there's all kinds of different Romulans with different agendas. They're not all, crazy paranoid. A lot of them are, but not all of them.
So it's interesting that you had mentioned Tyrul as one of your favorite characters, because I'd done a Deep Space Nine complete front-to-back rewatch years ago.
Nice.
And yeah, one of the things I thought was we were going to get Tyrul as sort of the way in to understanding Romulans. And she was going to be this character who's going to be hanging out on the station. And, we're going to be like, she's going to be like, now, why are they doing this? Sort of like Worf did in TNG, right?
Yeah.
Like gave us the Klingon point of view, or at least we learned later that he's not really a Klingon at all, but, his sort of Klingon wannabe point of view, right? Mm-hmm. But that was not Tyrul. She was legit.
Oh, yeah.
Romulan.
Hardcore Romulan.
Yeah, but she disappeared in 2 episodes. So we never got more of that. Eventually, they came out with the Picard show, and it featured Romulans heavily. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that as a Romulan fan, you were pretty excited. Or am I off base?
Oh, I was. I was very excited. I was a little hesitant at first, given my heavy investment in beta canon, because that's what we had. Romulan fans only had beta canon and maybe a handful of episodes that were canon. I wanted to see where there were points of divergence between this the Picard story and all the beta canon that I'm so familiar with, and there's quite a bit. The language is a bit different. I cannot wait. I'm hoping that they do, or CBS talks about the Romulan language that's spoken in Picard, because you hear it every now and then. Mm-hmm. And if I had the time and the mental energy these days, I'd like to go all in and see how the spoken language in Picard aligns with the language established by Diane Duane and expanded upon by fans. Because I'm familiar with some words, and I've done some, amateur translations for other people for Romulan, but I don't think they're the same language. And the written script is totally different. They the Romulan that we see in Next Gen and DS9, every previous canon episode, it's completely different from what we see in Picard, which is a vertical script. Like on the artifact, this it says this location has gone blank days without assimilation, and the blank gets filled in.
Which if you go to a construction work site, they have those signs.
Oh yeah. I love that they do that in Romulan as well. But everything that we saw before, it's very blocky. It's not vertical. It's horizontally laid out, and we presume that it's from left to right. It's read from left to right like English is, but it's an alien language. Who's to say that it isn't? But beyond that, I really enjoy the Romulans that we see in Picard. It's interesting having a story with a Romulan spy, I guess, Commodore O, so deep into Starfleet. I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, for sure. It was deeply interesting. And I think one of the things that was interesting to me is how they sort of set it up, and then the resolution of it was so fast. It's like she's there, she's bad, she's in on all the deets. Yeah. And then she's prepare to fight. What is all this? Just get it done, what are you waiting for? What is with all the dramatic waiting, and just go for it, and she waited a little too long, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they definitely had a point of view that made sense in the show. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but one of the things I think that all Star Trek fans really should do is, whenever talk of canon comes up, is limit yourself to the 4 corners of the screen and pay less attention to the things that the characters say about stuff, and just focus on what they show you.
Yeah, that's true.
Because when you're listening to any character say, we on our planet are XYZ, and here's what we believe, and then you see what they do. and they're not the same.
Yeah.
Focus on what they do, not what they say, right? And there's been plenty of times the Federation has said, the Federation believes blah, 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 but then they go do something completely different.
Yeah, right? A lot of times they do.
Yeah, so if you limit yourself to the four corners of the screen and pay more attention to what characters do rather than what they say, what is actually canonical is wildly different than what people say it is.
Oh, yeah. It is.
And you can go down some real big rabbit holes with this. And if people want to disagree with me, they can come at me on the Twitter, but I'll be happy to give you tons of examples as to why this is. Okay. Alex, I got to tell you that the M5 is after me. He says we've dallied too long. We have to talk about some episodes.
Okay.
So are you game?
I am.
So we've been talking about STO, and you in particular wanted to talk about that Romulan Arc.
Yes.
Is there anything about it that we have not yet talked about, or do you want to dive deeper?
There's more to these stories than I discussed previously that explain why I like them so much. And I'm referring to the storylines from the Ashes, Allies, and In Shadows. They're like the three after the tutorial when you play a Romulan character, and they explore you as a new captain in the Romulan Republic, and you're finding your footing in the galaxy after losing your homeworld once, and then losing your adopted homeworld. Clearly, you're going to have some issues, trust or otherwise, finding a new home. Like, there's got to be some trauma there, and so this kind of explores that, and I think it's done in a really interesting way, because not only do you have to deal with that trauma and the effects of that trauma, you've got the Tal Shiar and the Romulan Star Empire of what exists, or what's left of them after Hobus. They are out to frame the Romulan Republic as a terrorist organization because they don't like the Romulan Republic. It's an insurgency movement. Supposedly to them, and it is, but Datan, the leader of the Republic, he's not necessarily anti-Tal Shiar. He's more, he really embodies the unification message that Spock tried to teach. And so if he can find ways to bring Tal Shiar and Star Navy and Star Empire Romulans into the fold, that's all the better. But, not all of the Tal Shiar and Star Empire Romulans want to do that.
Yeah, they're not having it.
No, they're not going to have that. And you obviously want to be careful with inviting and tolerating people who have painted you as a galactic terrorist. There's some forgiveness limitations there, obviously. So this kind of explores that, defining your identity in the universe and finding your footing. It's kind of where I'm drawn mostly to it. I think that's mostly it. Like, you get to a point in the Allies arc where, so you're familiar with Tovan Kev. Your first officer is a Romulan who you can't dismiss no matter how much you want to. He's stuck with you forever. He used to date this woman who ends up being a Tal Shiar agent. And she's trying to convince you that, the Romulan Republic really is a terrorist organization, and I have proof. So go to these places and check this information out, and it's going to prove it to you, I promise. And, you start questioning, am I really doing the right thing? Is the Republic really the place I want to be in? And you find out that she's been fed misinformation, because what does the Tal Shiar do best but plant misinformation and manipulate people, including their own? And you get to a point where you find that she's wrong, and you prove to her that she was misled, and she still finds ways to forgive the Tal Shiar and insist that they were still right in some way. And you can't really help her. She's beyond helping, and I feel like that's very salient right now. I might get a little political here, but like with my family, I do not agree with my entire family politically these days. And, they find ways to forgive, everything that Trump did when he was in office. And I think that's beyond forgiveness. And so when it's someone close to you who makes you question your beliefs and your values, it's hard. And it's really a test of character and a test of the strength and potency of those values in your life. And so part of it is finding the truth for yourself, not necessarily listening to other people, which that's a huge thing for me.
Sure.
One of the big takeaways that I got when I was getting my undergrad in political science was, don't just believe anything that you hear, find news, source your news from a bunch of different sources and discover the truth for yourself. And I feel like that really touches on that, the importance of being true to yourself and finding the truth for yourself, not listening to other people and basing your opinions solely on what they say. So that was a huge explanation, but that's pretty much. I think it's
great. I mean, one of the things that interests me about Star Trek is when a particular episode deals with an ethical or moral dilemma and really dissects it and lays it out on the table. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's because just for me, I'm kind of a nerd, obviously a nerd, but I'm a certain flavor of nerd that I like that stuff. And, I read a lot of philosophy when I was in college, and I still think about that stuff quite a bit. And I think it's glorious that here it is in this online game that has that thing that for me is very core to Star Trek. When the best Star Trek episodes for me are episodes that do that.
Yeah.
And it's given you that experience, which I think is just fantastic. Right. And I'm also heartened to see that you're open to having different kinds of perspectives, because I tell you, as someone who is very active on Twitter, which you are, I see a lot of Twitter discourse is all about limiting discourse. Right. People are like, oh, I have 85,000 people on my block list, and like I don't even think I've ever seen 85,000 accounts. I don't even know. I don't even know how to block that. I mean, people can block who they want to block, but what I find weird is like when people celebrate the fact. Like I don't know what is celebratory about that. I find that very weird. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I kind of understand it. I mean, I personally use the block button liberally, but my experience as it's pretty obvious that I'm a woman on Twitter, and I'm cis and all of that, and so I definitely have gotten people like trying to hit on me and stuff on Twitter, and I'm like block.
It makes total sense.
And I appreciate Twitter as a forum for diversity of opinion, but diversity of opinion and tolerating that diversity of opinion doesn't mean like, tolerating that one person who's always in your mentions spewing like racist garbage. Like, I block those right away, and I block the people who defend that right away. Like, if you're going to defend that, I don't want you in my circle, because that's not what I'm here for.
Straight on. Yeah, no, I get it.
So,
you get
make
to
your Twitter
curate your experience.
Your own. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have 5 accounts that I've blocked.
Wow.
and none of them are actual humans. They're companies.
Oh, okay.
Or like stuff that, like, for example, like here's the kind of example, which is perfect, which is I kept getting ads from California healthcare. I don't live in California. Why are you trying to get me to sign up for California health exchanges? Like, and it was literally like every third tweet was like, sign up now. And I was like, I don't live in California. I don't know why, like, they're spending ad money to try to get a hold of me, And so finally I was like, just block this, it's stuff like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't know. It's weird, but I'm sure you attract a whole nother level of weirdness, right? So because you're very publicly and you put a lot of your personal self into your Twitter. Yeah. And so sometimes that attracts some nut jobs, which, is unfortunate.
Oh, it is. It does, and it is unfortunate. But, I still try, even with 1,000 followers, I'm still shocked that I've even passed the 3 digits, much less the 4 digits.
It's weird, isn't it? It's weird.
Like, I don't run my Twitter account. When people say, oh, how do you run your account? Like, when I feel like tweeting, I open the app and I just tweet it. Or, it's already open. I just, like, have a thought and I just say it. I don't curate what I say. I mean, I'm more careful now with 1,000 people. Like, that's a lot of people. And so I try to be more careful about what I say and stuff. And, you know, it's basically a platform that I have now. And so I try to use the platform that I have for good. So I try to just stay out of discourse as much as I can. If it's obviously like about social justice, that's not something to avoid. But when it's like the recent Star Trek Online discourse about the Janeway class and whether that belongs in Earth space dock, I said, you know, I'm in grad school. I've got a job. I've got way better and more important things to worry about than people online. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
Alex, now I want to move on and I want to talk about Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 13, That Hope Is You, Part 2. So here we have sort of the season ender of the most recent season of Discovery. The M5 tells me that this is a particularly special episode for you.
Yeah.
And so I want to understand what about this episode touches your heart, Alex. I ask you now.
Well, I had a lot of complicated emotions when I watched this episode, beyond the fact that it was the last episode and I was sad that it was over. But, you know, one of the biggest things that stood out for me for that episode was it kind of addresses that phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, which that's a very important ideology. But I feel like this kind of expands on that. Like, individual needs matter. They matter as much as the needs of the many still. And I feel like Su'Kal is a really good example of, like, ignoring or sacrificing individual needs is to weaken our communities. You know, community strength is, you know, it's like the weakest link thing. Like, as soon as you have a weak link, the chain is broken, or the whole chain is weakened. And so it's really important to have the individuals in your community cared for and taken care of. Everyone matters. Like, a lot of the people that I've seen on Twitter who did not like this episode, or they didn't like the theory behind the burn, they were like, well, they could have just let Su'Kal go, and, you know, he wasn't going to last that much longer on that planet anyway. And that just breaks my heart to hear that. Like, that's not Star Trek to me. The fact that Michael Burnham and Saru and everyone else who joined her, like, I can't remember everybody's names right now.
Yeah,
but,
it's okay.
The fact that they went to save him, and the fact that the fate of the galaxy, or at least the fate of, warp travel, at least, hinged on his well-being, and hinged on the fact that he had to overcome his fears, which that's really difficult to do alone. I mean, you can't do it alone sometimes. And, you know, the fact that he was thrown into a situation where he had to do it on his own. It is so poignant to me. Like, I guess part of what makes it poignant is being in this pandemic for a whole year. Sure. We've learned how important it is for our stress and for our well-being overall to care for ourselves on an individual basis in the face of fear and pain and uncertainty. Like, where would we be if we didn't have that knowledge or have that ability? Like, I don't know what I would do if I wasn't familiar with the concept of, self-care. Not, sure. Beyond self-care, beyond, bubble baths. Bubble baths and pretty flowers, it's so much more than that. Sometimes self-care is scary. Mm-hmm. Sometimes self-care is facing those fears, but there's nothing that says that you have to do that alone. In fact, having support from other people is key. And this episode just really hit that mark for me. And I also do a lot of work right now in my graduate program. I'm in a fellowship for program evaluation. And I'm helping an organization right now that serves mental health needs of the community that I live in. Mm-hmm. Okay. And mental health is such a big, important thing. And I feel like, we're focusing on it a lot now because we're realizing just how big it is, not because it didn't matter in the past. Leaderships must be made carefully. They need to also consider everyone, not just a privileged few. And so one could use the ideology of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few as justifying policies that harm minorities, the few, because they benefit the majority or the hegemony, the many. And when in reality, it's like we need to be supporting the needs of the minorities over the privileged folks who take up the majority, because their needs have been met for centuries. We need to. The minorities are part of our communities. We can't overlook that. And so, again, it's the weakest link thing. We need to take care of individuals in our communities for the sake of our communities. And Su'Kal was a great analogy for that. And so, for that reason, I don't think that Byrne was stupid or silly. And even beyond that, even beyond the metaphor, I feel like using Su'Kal for the Byrne was incredibly Star Trek. Like, having someone whose DNA is connected to dilithium.
Sure.
That sounds like something out of the original series.
Oh yeah,
like,
they do crazy stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, it's nothing odd. There's nothing odd about it. And so when I see people say, "Oh, this isn't Star Trek. That's not real science fiction," like, yeah, it is actually. Really, maybe you're due for original series rewatch because look at that.
I will say this, which is that as we record this, I've recently finished reading all of the Mark Cushman books, if you're not familiar with him. And he's a guy who went through like all the archival material and did all these interviews and basically wrote like a production history of Star Trek.
Wow. And
one of the things that you come across in his writing and in the research that he did is that it's very obvious that Gene was always the first to say that's not Star Trek if he didn't write it. Like if it did not come out of his typewriter and he would say that's not Star Trek and write like a 40-page memo and send it off to, all the powers that be, like why it was a bad idea. And there's, many, 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 many examples of this throughout like all the different eras of Star Trek where he was involved. And he was upset with something and, he was just sending memos at a furious pace. And it was always hard to kind of figure out what exactly was Star Trek, but he was quick to say that is not Star Trek. So I think there's sort of a long and glorious tradition of that in Star Trek, the universe of Star Trek, of saying that is not Star Trek. It comes right from Gene.
But what is Star Trek? We don't know.
Yeah, that was something you wouldn't necessarily find, sort of well defined, but he was very quick to point out when something wasn't Star Trek, and pretty much I think that meant anything he didn't write. And I say that out of love for the show and out of respect for Gene, but he definitely had a point of view on that. So if fans are interested, go check out some of the production histories of Star Trek, and these are the Voyages books, and you'll find lots of examples of that. Yeah,
I'll have to check those out myself.
Yeah, they're definitely interesting. Okay. So let's move on and let's talk about some Berman era Trek. Let's talk about the Drumhead from Next Generation, an episode that certainly comes up from time to time. In fact, quite frequently. But the thing that I'm interested in about the Drumhead, which is of course the one with Admiral Satie and the investigation of whether or not someone is a loyal Starfleet officer, is what about this particular episode speaks to you, Alex?
Well, that answer is kind of twofold. One of the things that makes it stand out to me is the fact that I wrote a paper on it in high school or in college. Tell me. I was in a legal writing class, and we had quite a bit of free reign on the topic that we wrote for our final essay. And I ended up writing mine on kangaroo courts and Drumhead trials, which the Drumhead, that's where that name comes from. Those are, I think I have notes on that here. Their Drumhead trials are military field trials that issue summary justice. There's a lack of due process and a lot of violations of individual rights for the sake of ease. And when I was at that level of college, I really wanted to go to law school. I was taking constitutional law, huge interest in due process and individual rights. And so, I found a way to write a huge essay about this episode and make it all about due process. And I even went into moral panics. That ended up being the major focus of that essay, because there is a moral panic aspect of this episode as well. And so, but really the other reason, which is also the reason why I wrote the paper, is it is so poignant. I was really fascinated even when I was watching this episode, because I was still in high school as well, and I was even doing law stuff when I was in high school.
Oh, great.
There's a lot of links here to individual versus collective rights, Fifth Amendment due process, like I said. And part of that is why I wanted to go into constitutional law. And so when I was able to take those constitutional law classes and take legal writing, I loved the episode even more. It just, I love law, even though I work in law right now and I don't love it as much as I thought I would. I'll just leave it at that. But, there's still a lot to love there. I feel like a lot of the analyses on this episode, they've been written so many times, it's like beating a dead horse. So I don't want to go too much into the intricacies of the episode. But I think one of the big quotes that stands out to me about this episode is when Picard tells Worf, I believe it's towards the end, "Villains who twirl their mustaches are easy to spot. Those who clothe themselves in good deeds are well camouflaged." And I feel that, I'm going to go into politics again. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You can talk about anything you want to talk about, Alex. Okay. We're okay.
I guess I'm apologizing to the audience too a little bit too.
No. We don't do that here. You're okay. It's all about you. And if you want to talk about that, you do it.
All right. Well, that quote reminds me a lot of, again, the divide between me and my family right now that was driven by our political views. And when I feel like around the time of the 2016 election, that was the first presidential election that I had lived through where I was old enough and cognizant of, the issues to really care about what was going on. And I, through a major part of the internet, I'm sure, had my own opinions, and they differed greatly from my family. My family is extremely conservative. Like, a lot of my family listened to Rush Limbaugh on the news or on the radio every morning. And, when I think
for my
about
overseas
that now,
listeners, that's a very conservative right-wing radio host here in the United States. He recently passed away as we record this.
Yeah. And, as I look back on that, I feel like I don't think my family members are bad people, but they've been kind of poisoned by propaganda who, like Rush Limbaugh, had disseminated really hateful ideologies under the guise of innocent motivations, like protecting our families and securing democracy. But you have to ask, what are we protecting our families from? What is the threat to this democracy? And you have to ask the motivations behind those questions and the motivations behind why they're identifying these threats as threats. Why is it that gay marriage is threatening to our, way of life? What is bad about that? What is bad about, miscegenation? And, those are questions that I ask myself, and I presume that other people ask themselves those questions as well, but I don't think that always happens. And, I feel like when we have propagandists saying things like that, they make it sound like these institutions, like our families and our democracy, they're under threat by and under attack by people who just disagree with them. When in reality, they're the ones who are manipulating people into agreeing with them to give their own opinions merit and validity. Trying to make this ideal world in their own eye. And there's just nothing right to that to me. Finding ways to, worm your beliefs into convincing other people what's right and wrong. People should believe what they think is right, not, they shouldn't believe what you think is right, is what I'm trying to say. And that's a big thing with Admiral Satie, because she clearly has an agenda in this episode.
Sure.
But she uses that in tandem with her power and influence to, really wreak some havoc on the Enterprise in this episode. I feel like a lot of the episode also goes into, blood essentialism too, which I just recently have been taking sociology classes for my degree, and really grateful that I've been taking them. I've learned so much. And, I feel like crewman Tarses and Jededion, the Klingon who was on the Enterprise, they were both subject to increased scrutiny and unfair punishment simply because of their heritage. Like, Jededion was under scrutiny because he was a Klingon. He's an enemy of the state. And Tarses was an enemy of the state too, because his, dad or grandfather was Romulan. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't fully Romulan. He had no ties to the Romulan Star Empire. But just the fact that they had ties to enemies of the Federation through their blood, and Admiral Satie and her team saw fit to punish them with total lack of evidence that either of them were spies or doing anything nefarious. It's like, you're not trying them for their actual actions. You're trying them for who they are supposedly are. We're our actions, not our heritage. And I think that's a really important thing to emphasize with this episode, and a thing that really echoes a lot with me, having taken all these classes.
There's an interesting political match, I think, between the Admiral Satie character and a real historical figure, which was a guy named James Jesus Angleton, who was actually, he's not all that well known, but
I don't recognize the name.
He was the chief of CIA counterintelligence from 1950 something to like the mid 70s. So for 20 years, for 20 years, he was the chief anti-spy in the CIA, right? And the guy was legit like paranoid. Okay.
Oh,
which again, that's kind of goes along with the job. I mean, you don't want someone who's like, it's probably all good.
Whatever.
Yeah. That's not the guy you want in that job. No. But this guy was like seriously mental, and he literally saw spies everywhere. Right. Which again, it was probably true that there were people who were trying to infiltrate the organization. Right. Mm-hmm. That was true. But he burned down and burned bridges and hurt a lot of people. Mm-hmm. With a lot of accusations, and he was in that job for 20 years.
Oh my God.
So yeah. And I remembered reading some articles about him and sort of some of the stuff that he'd done. And it's really an interesting character to take a look at historically, because, at some point you want people who were like that.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an interesting perspective on this since you were studying legal stuff. When I did my MBA, I took a class that was on legal strategy, business strategy class.
Okay.
And they had a guest speaker who was a corporate attorney.
Wow.
And it was probably the most interesting lecture that I sat through in my entire MBA, because this guy was talking about like how to use your corporate attorney, like why do you have attorneys working for corporations, right? And like what they can do for you. And he was basically talking about how to read a contract. And his whole point of view is that, and in my job, I have actually negotiated corporate contracts, right? But I'm in the business. So I'm like trying to get a thing to accomplish some business objective. And so when you're talking to people like me, I'm excited. Like, I need this vendor and I need to get this agreement with this vendor so that we can do this incredible project to get to this business objective. Like, I'm excited, right? I want to get the PO through, or the purchase order through. I want to get them in the vendor system, and I want to like get cracking, right? Yeah. Because I've got like these 7 objectives, and my boss is asking me like, what's the status of the apparatus, and I'm like, I'm working on it, and I'm very excited. You need someone who's going to say, what if the vendor doesn't do a single thing.
Yeah.
Right? What if they're just like, yep, they signed the document, so let's all go on vacation for 2 months? What happens if the vendor doesn't perform?
Exactly.
How could they not meet the terms and still get paid? Like, you want someone who's going to read that contract with a cynical eye to try to protect the company and to protect you. So that if this vendor goes sideways or something bad happens, in spite of your best efforts, right, with the best of intentions, are we protecting the company and protecting you, as the employee who negotiated this, right? And I just remember being like, this is gold. Like, I am writing all of this down, right? And he went through a lot of the terms and conditions that I typically see in these contracts.
Uh-huh.
And he gave me such good advice, like about venue and about this and that. And, the first couple times years ago, I was negotiating contracts. Like, I went to the corporate attorney, who's like, sitting on the 83rd floor in Manhattan, and I was like, his name was Larry. And I was like, Larry, look, here's what I think we need to do. And he was like, oh, this is good. This is good. I was like, yeah, it was because I saved those notes from that lecture. And I was, yeah. So, anyway, that was a long wind up for the pitch, but it's really that you want someone who sort of has that point of view at times, right? The thing is to
totally
channel
helpful.
It constructively, and she got too much free reign. And that, I think, was the problem here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She definitely allowed herself to just quite literally fall down a rabbit hole with her own agenda. And I agree. You definitely want someone like that in that position, but you've got to make sure that they're being supervised in some way. There's got to be a check on them, because you're going to end up with ethical violations left and right if you don't, like this episode very clearly demonstrated.
Well, I think it also ties into what we were just talking about in the Discovery episode as well, which is that, if you're not respecting individual rights, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Always and everywhere, absolute utilitarianism leads to dystopian hellholes.
Yeah.
Always. Right? If you're an absolutist utilitarian, right? We need to do this for the group. Mm-hmm. Well, that can lead you to some very suboptimal outcomes. Oh, yeah. And the guardrails have to be up. And they clearly weren't for the longest time in this episode. And
yeah.
That's what I take from it as I look at it. All right. Anything else you want to say on the drumhead?
I that pretty much exhausted all my notes.
All right. Then I say we talk about some Deep Space Nine. Alex, are you game?
Okay. Is this It's Only a Paper Moon?
It is. It's Only a Paper Moon. That's right. So yeah, I think we should definitely talk about this one.
Okay.
So by way of introduction, this is the one, of course, where Nog is having some problems readjusting to his life back on Deep Space Nine. And I have a lot of opinions on this episode, but I'm not going to go into them. Only because on my podcasting extravaganza, which I did in episode mid-30s somewhere, which is where I turned the tables and I had guests on to interview me about Star Trek, I talked about this episode extensively. So if people want to know what I think about it, you can go back to that, and I'll put a link up to that in the show notes. But it's certainly a very interesting episode in that a lot of it doesn't really take place on the space station per se. It's a lot of holodeck. It doesn't even take place sort of in the realm of Starfleet and the Federation. It's in this sort of mythical hotel in the 50s Vegas era. So certainly it has a lot of unusual factors to it. But
it does.
What about this episode really speaks to you, Alex?
Well, the big thing that stands out to me and why I wanted to pick this is like the aspect of this episode of coping with trauma. Mm-hmm. I'm not a veteran. I've never was in war or anything, but I have my own traumas that I've experienced and lived through. And I not at all want to say that they're, the same or equal or better or worse in any way to, veterans' experiences, but the traumas that we experience are real. So I guess that's a little tangent that I just went off on, but
it's okay. It's totally allowed.
Nog losing his leg. Again, I haven't lost any limbs either, but that is incredibly profound to have to go through. And I haven't watched this episode in a long time. I feel kind of bad. I didn't do my research as well as I could have, but he's coping with that in Is it a healthy coping mechanism? Maybe not. Living in that holodeck, kind of living in a little fantasy, but, I feel like at some point you do have to do what you have to that makes you feel better. Mm-hmm. That grounds you. But at the same time, there's definitely a limit to that as well. Finding ways to cope healthily with trauma is really important. Connecting with other people and not necessarily, getting lost in, what's basically the Star Trek equivalent of TV in a way.
Sure, yeah.
TV and books. That's fine. It's an outlet, but I think the best way that you can find to cope with trauma is to connect with other people, like on a human level, and or a Ferengi level if you're Nog. I think that's kind of all I had on this one. That's like the big thing that stands out for me on this episode, and that's why I think it's an important commentary that we don't see very often. I don't watch tons of TV because why would I? There's Star Trek.
A very common problem we run into here on TrekProfiles.
But, I don't think this is that common of a theme, is what I'm trying to say. And it's nice to have that addressed.
Yeah, it's I think one of the problems that Star Trek has had historically, and it's just because of how TV was produced, is that they just didn't really address these serious issues that would have to be psychologically affecting.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, and I don't want to necessarily go on a tangent here about Tuvix, but I think that's what I think is really the problem with the episode. Is that regardless of where you come down on it, I feel like it was the kind of decision that would be tormenting and haunting for Janeway. And I just feel like we never saw it, right? Yeah. It's like, even if you're absolutely convinced she did the right thing, which is a perfectly valid point of view, to still say, I'm going to take this person, this live person in front of me that has agency, and I'm going to end their life because it serves the needs of the ship, or the needs of our mission. Wow. Okay. I'm going to be expecting like 6 weeks, like in a dark room, probably drinking myself silly, after that.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
But we never saw the resolution of that.
I wish we did.
Yeah. It's like I felt like there had to have been the payoff, that had to have. I wanted to see the toll that decision took.
Right.
And so regardless of where people fall on Tuvix, that's my critique. Yeah,
it is. I get so tired of the Tuvix debates because there is no right answer. That's why I feel like that's why they made that episode, because it's just one of those ethical dilemmas that has no right answer. And, whenever I see debates, I'm like, oh God, not this again.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I agree. I would have liked to see, the effects of that decision on Janeway, see how that affected her as a captain and as a person, as a friend to both of these individuals prior to, their bonding, I guess one could say.
I can tell you this. I mean, I am a veteran, and one thing I know for sure is that there were some lower decks people on the Voyager that probably had conversations like this. Man, oh man, I am never going to piss off Janeway because she will stick you in the transporter and that'll be the end of you,
Oh my God.
Because that's the kind of cynicism that the people in the bowels of the ship have about things. But it would also have to be the case, and this is the other side of it, that there would be people on the ship that would have had a serious problem with this.
Oh, yeah.
Like a serious, just like in the fandom, right? There are people who are divided on it, right?
Equally divided on the ship.
Yeah, and there were people who'd be like, I can't believe our captain did that, right? And that, to me, would have been an amazing thing to explore.
Oh, my gosh.
And
we were shortchanged, seriously.
I know. It's like there's all this richness that they could have explored. And instead, they chose to do other things. And that's why I find the episode ultimately disappointing.
Yeah.
But I do like the ethical dilemma. That's always what I enjoy, because it sort of puts that the Kantian idea that like we have these maxims that we should live by. And so, we do not take innocent life, right? We don't do that. Okay, well, we're going to violate that here. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
but then, so the Kantians would tell you, absolutely no way can you do this. Where then you have the utilitarians who are like, you can, is whatever the greatest good for the greatest number. That's what we should do. Well, then okay, right? But adhering too closely to either of these philosophies can lead to some very suboptimal outcomes.
Yeah.
And as we've already talked about. So I like that they made the contrast so absolute in this one. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we meant to talk about It's Only a Paper Moon, but somehow we ended up on Tuvix.
Well, I feel like It's Only a Paper Moon kind of gives us that, not necessarily a resolution, but it gives us more of an expansion that we didn't get for Tuvix.
Right.
I feel like if we had the It's Only a Paper Moon equivalent to Tuvix, that could have made the Tuvix decision that Janeway made so much more profound and poignant, and we probably would have had even worse discourse over it. So maybe it's a blessing and a curse, but...
you can fangasm about it and be like, imagine that you're the crewman who has to go clean out Tuvix's quarters now.
Oh,
right? What would that scene be like, right?
There's a fanfic on it now. I'm sure.
There's a fanfic for everything.
Yeah.
There's a fanfic for everything. I had we had a whole fanfic podcast, and so I had someone on who was very big into that, and she recommended I read some fanfics, and we went down a rabbit hole because then I started reading some other stuff, and then there was some other stuff, and then I got deeply into some really bad stuff, and I was like, I'm out.
Oh my God.
So you made an unconventional pick, Alex, which we always love here on Trek Profiles. People sort of pick, a lot of the same episodes over and over again, which is okay. But every now and then people surprise me and pick something different. So you picked Make It So, Leadership Lessons from Star Trek The Next Generation. By Wes Roberts and Bill Ross. So you picked a Star Trek leadership book, which we're on video here. You're holding it up excitedly as we're recording this. So I'm going to provide a link to it in the show notes if people are interested. So tell me, when I asked you what is the things in Star Trek that matter the most to you, you picked a leadership book. Some of these books, I can tell you, being an evil Ferengi businessman myself, some of these things are written for sort of amusement. Some of them are written quite seriously. I have to know, what is it about this particular book appealed to you?
Well, I mean, it's kind of weird. I saw this on the shelf.
We love the weirdness here. It's okay.
Oh, yeah. I saw this on the shelf. It's one of the books that my mom had, when she was in her huge Trekkie phase herself. And I saw Picard, and I saw, clearly it says Make It So on the side, and I was like, that's Picard, that's Star Trek. I even have a Make It So pin up here.
Oh, that's great.
So, I didn't even realize it was like leadership lessons from Star Trek The Next Generation. I was like, it's about Star Trek, I'm going to read it. And I was really pleased with it. I read it after I watched Next Gen, I think. And what it does is it goes over a couple different episodes, and it's written kind of like Picard's, like, his personal log. I almost said diary, which I think that would have just ended my Star Trek fan license.
No.
It's not
no such
diary. But there's 9 chapters, and so they go over 9 different episodes, and I'd have to thumb through this again to remember the episodes, but I know the drumhead is in there somewhere. And I actually, when I wrote that essay on the drumhead, I cited a couple lines from this book with reference to that episode, because, I really liked the way the author's perspective on that episode. So, it's really interesting for me because as a poli-sci student, as a public policy student, I don't really see what division of, Starfleet that I would ever be in. I think I'd be okay with command. I could see myself as like Attila in the command training program, but, certainly not engineering or security or anything like that.
Would you be in the diplomatic corps?
I would do the diplomatic corps, I think. Yeah, but, thinking of, what division I would be in, I part of what makes me think command is, everything that I read from this book, like all these important aspects, like the 9 chapters, it's focus, urgency, initiative, competence, communication, politics, intellectual honesty, interdependence, and resilience. And even from a perspective that's not, you're not leading people per se, you're not a starship captain, you're not even a captain in real life. Those are really important things to keep in mind for life. Those are really important lessons to learn and understand. And I feel it now more than I did before, now that I'm in public policy, but it was still very poignant as a hopeful law student. Those were values that I wanted to embody, but now with public policy, even as a policy analyst, you can affect change, and you have to, recognize the impact that change has. And so there is kind of a leadership aspect to it. And so, this is just a realization I'm making now as I'm speaking about it. Maybe I should give this book a read through again, because the Wes Roberts, he's a PhD, and I'd have to read this again, what his doctorate degree is in. Maybe it's, psychology or something like that, because he's clearly an expert in the field, and he knows, how to apply the lessons that we learn in those episodes to a leadership perspective, and, how to make yourself a greater leader and all of that. And now I'm thinking back to your point earlier when you were saying that sometimes these leadership books are written more for entertainment, and this is definitely, I think this straddles the line.
Sometimes. An example I usually give is there was a really big one about maybe 20, 25 years ago called The Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun.
Oh, I've heard of that book.
And I mean, it's basically for amusement, but every now and then there's a little nugget in there, that you might draw upon.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'd say is that I think it's important, not just for you, but for anybody who's listening to this, is to keep in mind that leadership is not necessarily a spot on an org chart.
No, yeah.
Right. And it's not necessarily even within a political structure, right? There's people who are informal leaders on the team, it could be at work where, you're at a team meeting and the boss says something and everybody turns to look at Sally because whatever she says is kind of how it goes, right? And if she says, this is going to be great, then everyone's like, yeah, this is great, and if she's this is going to be bad, everyone's like, yeah, this is bad, and there's so many opportunities for people to practice leadership that have nothing to do with even their work. I mean, it could be in their gardening club, in your Star Trek fan club. There's people who have to lead those things, right? Uh-huh. And so the lessons that you can learn from these kinds of books, if you take it seriously and really try to figure out how to apply it to yourself, can actually matter. Yeah. Right? I mean, understanding the interdependence, right? That the leader is not the person who's necessarily out there with a club cracking skulls and leaving a trail of dead bodies to try to accomplish some objective, which, you can do. Yeah. And some leaders do. But the problem is that that's not something you can redo.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. And so there's all these opportunities for leadership in life. And even like within our little Star Trek fandom, there are people that people look at. Now, I'm not saying I'm one of these people. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm not. There's people that are looked at as leaders in the fandom. And if they go away, then everything seems to go that way, you know, and their reactions really count too.
Yeah.
Even virtually.
Yeah. And I feel like a part of what makes the book work, aside from being more for entertainment, is just how Star Trek is written. It's clearly, it lends so well to being in a leadership book, because Picard already kind of, I know some people will disagree with me. Picard's one of my favorite captains. I feel like he embodies a strong leader. And that was definitely the intention of the writers when they were writing Next Gen. And so I feel like it lends itself really well to being in this book, because, they pick some choice episodes like the Drumhead. They just, extract the leadership lessons. And it's like, I never thought of that episode that way. Or that really resonates with me. I thought of that with that episode. And so it's neat. Seeing that new perspective is really neat. And I appreciate the connection that you drew as well to, leadership can even come from non-leadership prone areas, like being a leader in fandom, or because you don't really choose to become a leader. I don't think it's kind of like being an influencer. You don't just say, I'm going to be an influencer, and it just happens. There's a lot of work involved. And so, what you say matters a lot to other people. If they're looking up to you, you have to use your platform mindfully, and you can use the principles that Mr. Picard shares in this book. Well, Picard, quote unquote, Picard through the mind of Wes Roberts and Bill Ross.
Yeah. It's just going to be their interpretation of it, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, in any book like this, I mean, the main purpose of it, right, is to spur thinking on the part of the reader and to apply it to your own life. Now, you may not know that. In fact, I'm pretty sure you don't know this, but what I actually do for a living is organizational development, organizational psychology, corporate training, leadership training, all of that. So this is like right in my wheelhouse.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's what I do. And the episode that I always pick as like the best one in Star Trek to talk about leadership is the Galileo 7 from TOS.
Okay.
Because it's where Spock fails as a leader. And it's when you have the bad examples, I think, are easier for people to identify, because when leadership is going well, it's like you don't notice it almost. It's like it doesn't necessarily come to the top, right? When you're watching a particular episode when someone's leading well. But when someone's like, leading and it's a dumpster fire, you're watching it kind of through closed fingers over your eyes. You're like, no, please don't do that thing. Don't do the thing. And they're doing the thing. So I talked about that one too in the podcast extravaganza. So if people want a deeper dive, they can go check that out. But I think it's really interesting that Picard was also a leader that sort of had his own faults too.
Oh yeah,
he
definitely did.
Yeah, like right there at Encounter at Farpoint, he sees himself as like the Starfleet leader, but he's in this position where he's also leading the families that are on board the ship, right? And he doesn't want that. In fact, he tells Riker, like, that's not going to be my thing. That's going to be your thing, right? And like keep all that away from me. And to me, that is actually one of the things that I like the best about Encounter at Farpoint, which is an episode that gets, a lot of, that doesn't get a lot of love in the fandom. But it's one of the things I appreciate about that episode because it struck me as very true. Yeah. That, we, as people, we have these things in our lives that we really like and these things that we really don't. And, he was like, I want to do this and I'm going to be the captain and I'm going to be Captain Lee and I'm going to be on this pedestal and, I'm going to be up here and y'all going to keep all that other stuff away from me, especially the children who are sticky and yell a lot, Yeah. But if you look at the sort of the great big arc of Picard throughout TNG, it all comes full circle because at the end, the whole thing is like him not being on the pedestal and going to the game, right? Going to the poker game.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a great character development that you see over the show. And even when you go into Picard, like the series Picard, you see like an extension of that, where he's kind of realizing the failings of Starfleet and how it wasn't all, I don't want to say like happy butterflies, because that's not really Starfleet in some ways. But I guess it kind of is in other ways. But, he realizes Starfleet's failings, whereas, at Encounter at Farpoint, he's got the Starfleet hammer in his hand or something like that. So, yeah, it's an interesting development that we get to see, and I'm actually really grateful that we get to see that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best things about it. So, all right, let's talk about one more. Let's talk about a short trek. And I'm always excited to talk about the short treks because I don't think they get the lurve that they should because they're so short. But you have picked Runaway, a Tilly short trek with the wonderful Poe character. I won't actually try to pronounce the full name because I would slaughter it mercilessly, so I shan't do that. But what in particular about Runaway was appealing to you?
Well, I feel like that was the episode where it really confirmed to me that I'm basically Tilly in real life. Tilly's probably my favorite character, like Starfleet character. I couldn't tell you my overall favorite. That's impossible, but I love Tilly.
Okay.
And this episode really stood out to me because there's that scene when you open the short trek. You open the episode and she's talking about her life, and I think it kind of extends into Discovery seasons 1 and 2 as well, not just this episode, but you learn a lot about her past, and when it's revealed that was constantly questioned and challenged and compared to others, that hit really close to home for me. When I was a tween and a teen, I was compared mercilessly to my stepsister.
Oof.
Why can't you be like her? We had such drastically different upbringings and experiences. We were totally different people. And comparing us was just not fair. And I'll toot my own horn, but I had to be way more resilient than she had to be, because where she got everything that she wanted from her parents and her family, I didn't. I had to work a lot harder for what I needed and what I wanted. And so
good on you.
Yeah, thank you. And so seeing Tilly in that same position, it's like, whoa, someone gets me. And it was just yet another thing about her that really resonated with me, right? And so, she also there's a little bit of I can't remember if it's in the short trek herself, or in the short trek itself, but her school experience was a lot like mine too. I moved schools a ton until I made it into high school.
You're talking about the novel.
Is it the novel? Okay, now I'm kind of going all over the place. So
you read the novel with the background, with Tilly's background, and
yeah.
She ended up working on a freighter or something. I remembered reading all that.
Yeah, and because I moved schools a lot until I made it into high school. I attended the same high school for all 4 years, which is a huge shock given everything. But prior to that, I'd make friends in one school and only to change schools the next year, kind of like her and May. I can't remember the episode in Discovery.
It's okay.
But, I was very much a bullied kid. I was very misunderstood. No one believed in me. I didn't even believe in myself. And, it really wore me down, and it made my public school experience a living hell. Like, I never want to relive those days. I hear people talk about how they want to go back to high school, and I'm like, no, that can stay in the past. Let's not go back to that. But you know what? Despite that, I came out alive, and I'm still learning to come to terms with all those experiences that I had and interface them with my present self. But I feel like because of all of that, I'm way more resilient and empathetic towards other people now than I had my formative years been any easier. I still have a lot of pain and trauma that I'm working through, but I've made it very far, and far enough that I know that I can learn to incorporate those experiences, incorporate that kind of shadow self into who I am today. Where it might be easier to block it out and forget it, I don't think that's the healthy thing to do. I feel like I should honor that. And so when I see Tilly, a character who is like literally me, I see and headcanon her as being at least coded to be neurodivergent. I see her being successful and recognized and supported and celebrated. That is really uplifting to me in a way that I've never felt before. Accurate and respectful representation of neurodivergence in media is really rare, especially for women. And, for the longest time, the closest we had was Barkley.
Right.
And I find him more of a caricature in a not necessarily polite way. I think of him like Sheldon in the Big Bang Theory. I cannot stand him. I feel like he's the punchline to a joke rather than a whole person. And I feel that same way as Barclay. Like, to younger me, when I was watching Next Gen and I saw him, I saw a lot of myself in him, but it basically commuted to me that I would be equally looked down upon in the diverse and tolerant future as I am now for, being neurodiverse. And so, I would love it if Tilly were canonically neurodivergent, like if she had canon ADHD or autism or something like that. But,
so I think you are on the spectrum then? I
am. And okay. I would like to, I don't have an official diagnosis of ADHD, but it's something that I've actually been considering pursuing recently. Since I hit grad school. It's like, everything is suddenly starting to make sense and starting to align with ADHD. I would love it if it was canon, but, I know that Mae Wiseman has said that she welcomes fans for that headcanon otherwise, because it's not as meaningful to me that it's not canon, but it's still very meaningful to me anyway that I can see someone just like me being respected and, being celebrated in a way that I've not experienced much in my life.
We were talking earlier in the podcast about how Star Trek plays very differently when you watch it closely and how when you stick to the four corners of the screen and what you actually see in the show, right?
Right.
And fans talk about how the Star Trek future is this wonderful place, but like when you look at the way they treat Barclay, it is very bad.
Yeah, it's awful.
The other example of this, which I think is even worse, is the straight up racism that our Starfleet characters have towards Quark. In Deep Space Nine. It's straight up racist. And they're like, well, this is the great future. We no longer do that. What are you talking about? Like, it's in the show. Like, have you not watched the show? It's right there. They're not even trying to hide it. And if you took Quark as he was and just replaced it with a human character and kept those same lines there, I mean, I think people would have lost their minds.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that there is something to be said for that. I mean, you'd mentioned the Big Bang Theory, and my wife, who loves the show, is always trying to get me to watch it, and I'm like, I don't need to watch. I'm the show. Like, I don't need to watch that.
Yeah.
Like I'm the person that people come to say, explain the joke to me, right? Like that's right. My coworker would do that. She would come in and she'd like, now what was this? I was like, oh, that has to do with Battlestar Galactica, and that's a reference to Neil deGrasse Tyson or whatever.
Right.
And I don't need to watch the show. Like, I'm living the life of the show. So, but it's interesting you feel that Sheldon is more of a caricature than like a positive role model.
Yeah, I think part of it is, I've had family like I know that my dad and my step family really love the show, and they're always like, yeah, Sheldon said this one thing in this one episode. It really reminded me a lot of you. And then like I look at Sheldon and it's like, that is really hurtful because, he's like the comic relief, but he's definitely coded to be autistic, and it hurts.
Yeah. People
like me and myself we're not punchlines, and we're not, comic relief. We're just as much people as you all are. Even if we're
we deserve
different.
To be taken seriously.
Yeah. And being taken seriously is something that I've grappled with a lot. It's definitely more prominent in my life now that I'm a grad student, because I mean, obviously I've gone through a lot just to make it to this point, so
sure,
there's a little respect there. But I have serious imposter syndrome in the program. I mean, oh God, I take longer to make questions, and I don't have as much conversations that look exactly like my peers. Am I doing something wrong? And I know
I think that's part of being a human.
Yeah,
I really do, Alex. I mean, because I've done coaching with people that are in very high level positions. And I've been doing this work for 25 years in my personal life,
right.
for my job that, they pay me for this. And I can tell you that it's not unusual to look around and to say, how did I get here? It's right. Like that line from that old song, how did I get here? I think that that's a normal thing. And I think the thing that I want to stress to anyone who's listening to this, which is that if there's someone out there that you believe doesn't do that, there's probably something wrong with them.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's very normal to always question ourselves. It's a human thing to do because we have thousands of years, millions of years of evolution in us to be looking for danger, right? And to always caution us against being too complacent, right? Because there could be danger around the next bend. And so we have it in us to sort of have that warning system and to constantly be questioning, am I safe right now? And is everything okay?
Right.
And so I just want to tell you, I think it's normal and it's okay.
Yeah.
For what it's worth,
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that, my experiences in the past with, not being taken seriously at all, that has definitely exacerbated that imposter syndrome in a way. Like, oh God, am I going to be doing something that's going to lead again to this situation where people think I don't belong here, or people think I'm misplaced, or, I only made it here by, some miracle. So, yeah.
So we've talked about a fair number of episodes. We've talked about your fandom experience. We've talked about a lot of different elements of Star Trek. And one of the things that's come up repeatedly is the fact that you're a grad student, and that is no easy thing. I was a grad student once upon a time. In fact, I'm looking at my diploma right over there.
Nice.
I went to my state U right here, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Go Rebels. And so I know sort of what that workload is like. And just like you, I also worked through that experience. So it's certainly a situation where your time is at a premium.
Oh, it is.
But yet you're finding time to post heavily on Twitter in a very Star Trek heavy Twitter account. You're playing a lot of Star Trek Online and doing all this wonderful art, which people should definitely check out. Your links to your art pages. No, it's really wonderful. And I'll provide links to all that in the show notes. And people should definitely go check all that out. Your work at DeviantArt has been great. And I saw some of the Discovery earrings you just made that you put on Twitter the other day.
I was wearing them earlier.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you're spending a lot of your very precious free time on Star Trek.
Yeah.
I want to put the question to you directly. Why does Star Trek matter to you?
Well, oh gosh. I feel like it was pretty illustrated in very long terms in my previous answers, but I feel like Star Trek kind of gives me a really nice thing to look forward to, or at least, aspire to. It drove me to law. I don't feel as much of a drive to public policy through Star Trek. I actually feel kind of a drive to it through Stargate. Specifically Stargate Atlantis, Dr. Weir, but this is a Star Trek podcast.
It's okay. We love it all here. You can talk about how much you love Stargate. It's okay.
Well, but
Atlantis is the only one I've actually seen. I haven't seen all the others.
I love Atlantis. And I love Dr. Weir. I would be Dr. Weir's intern if I could. I would love that job.
All right. So if there's any Dr. Weirs out there, you're right, contact me and I'll put you in touch.
Please DM me if you're Dr. Weir.
Absolutely.
But anyway, it's like I think Heather Ray on Twitter, she had actually asked a question like this a long time ago, and what does Trek mean to you? And it really is something that I can aspire to. It's like a set of morals and values that really align with me as I am a person outside of Star Trek, whatever that means. I feel like not only did it align with the values that I had and grew up with, it gave me more as I paid more attention to it, because I obviously was raised in a Star Trek friendly household, and I feel like it's hard to ignore those values that are disseminated through Star Trek. And so I think that really made its way down the pipeline to me as a kid. And it impacted me a lot through high school and even more through college, feeling it a lot through grad school, of course, even in my job. So I guess that's what it is to me.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation, Alex. I've had a blast. I hope you have as well.
I have.
But the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Okay, let's do it.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little show here.
Okay.
Are you ready to face the M5?
Well, ready as I'll ever be, I guess.
Okay, M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Alex's responses.
M5 acknowledges.
Question 1. Spock, beard or no beard?
Beard.
Question 2. Would you rather have Geordi's cool red pad with the buttons on it or Crusher's blue lab coat with the pockets?
I like pockets.
Question 3. Survival situation. Which inhospitable climate are you better able to navigate? The heat of the Vulcan's forge or the frozen Andorian northern wastes?
I'm from a desert. We're going for the Vulcan's forge.
Question 4. Going into battle Klingon style. Choose your bladed weapon, Batleth or Mek'leth.
I like the Mek'leth.
And finally, just for you, Alex, question 5. Which Romulan device is better, the plasma weapon or the cloaking device?
Cloaking device, obviously.
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 Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing results.
Alex, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Yay.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little show. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Alex is awarded the title of Ambassador Plenipotentiary and Extraordinary for the Romulan Star Empire.
Awesome.
So there you go.
Cool. I'll wear it with pride.
So now you are not only in public policy, you're in public policy for the Romulans. So there you go.
Awesome. I'm going to do so much program evaluation now.
So, Alex, please tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation.
Well, I think the best way you can contact me was on Twitter. The handle is spelled RURINNFANE, since the double N kind of makes things a little weird. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, why don't you tell people about your podcast?
Oh, yeah. So I just recently started being a co-host on Ship Talking Pod with my friend Brandon. And we also have James and George and Robbie. We talk ship. It's all about Star Trek ships. Sometimes it's ship adjacent, but for the most part, it's ships. And so if you really like ships, come join us.
So is it like STO ships, or is it all the ships, or
all ships?
Whatever Star Trek ship stuff we want to talk about?
Yeah, and we'll talk about all ships, and there have been some big names on the podcast already, like Andrew Probert, who designed the Ambassador class. We've had some actors on. I believe they spoke with Robert Duncan McNeil right before I was brought on. There's more super cool people down the pipeline, which I
very exciting.
Can't mention, but stay tuned. But they're a nice short format, so if you have a super short attention span like myself, they work really great.
Wonderful. And where can people find that podcast if they're interested?
So you can find Ship Talking Pod at literally shiptalkingpod.com. And it's got links to, all kinds of other ways in which you can watch or listen to the podcast, whatever platform you prefer. We have a Patreon and merch. So if you're interested in that as well, there's that as well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And people should definitely follow you on Twitter and check out all of your great art. We'll put links to all of that in the show notes, of course, over at TrekProfiles.com.
Thanks.
So, Alex, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Yeah, it was super fun.
here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this very episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your notes of sincere and loving appreciation, your vituperative volleys of invective, or audio recordings of yourself reciting odes in honor of Star Trek in the style of Vogon poetry to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Anything you send me may be used in the show, or it may be forced to sit in the corner wearing a Spock helmet. Some portions of the Kobayashi Maru questions in this very episode were written by listeners Abby Summer and Ross Webster, listeners just like you. So check my website to see how you can send in your own questions for possible use on the show, and we thank Abby and Ross for their questions. This time, I leave you with a quote from Sukal, who in the episode That Hope Is You, Part 2 said, quote, "Wanting is not the same as doing," close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
Yeah, so I got your headshot. Oh my God, that Spock Bear baby picture, A+. Like A double plus on that. It's fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're every campaigner's worst nightmare.
Yeah, I'm not the person who's going to be like, I couldn't sleep because my candidate. You know, it's like I don't have a candidate. We're totally going down a rabbit hole here.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry, but since you're a poli-sci student, you might enjoy this kind of stuff. But in our state in Nevada, we actually have none of these candidates as on the ballot for every election. So you can go and vote and say, I don't want any of these people. That's a choice.
Wow. That's actually kind of interesting.
So what happens is, I feel that removes any possibility of saying, I don't want to vote. Like, how can you say I can't vote when there's an option that says, I think all these choices suck? You know, if you're voting for your mayor, I mean, I don't know, party politics isn't the thing. It's all about what's your policy on trash pickup, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, because those policies affect you a little more differently. And, you know, that's where I am right now with public policy. You know, I'm trying actually to get an internship right now at my county level or my city level because, you know, I thought about working at the state, even federal. Nah, maybe not. And I don't even know if I want to work in government. I think it'll take actually working in government to make that decision. But, you know, I could work anywhere really. So we'll see. But, yeah, I've actually been talking to people at the city's mayor's office about, you know, how they come up with these different policies, where they derive or where they find people to come up with these policies and what they're based on, all that. It's really interesting. So they, you know, I think if you're going to be voting at all, you should be voting at, you know, the most local elections you can have.
Oh, yeah. That's
closest to, or I feel like that's closest to direct democracy. It's as close as you're going to get. Yeah, let me get a little water.
Yeah, sure. Do it. Go for it.
I'm sure you're very well aware of low humidity. It's 3% humidity here, so...
Hey, sister. Samesies.
Yeah. It's very dry right now, so...
Oh, yeah. It's weird, because when I used to travel for work quite a bit, before times, I was on the road a lot.
Oh, wow.
And you know, my company, I'm still working and all that, but now it's all online. Yeah. But I always used to forget when I would go to the East Coast, like, oh yeah, I really have to dry off when I get out of the shower. Because in Vegas, like, you know, it's like, since I don't have hair, it's like very simple, you know, 5 seconds. and I'm all done.
Yeah.
When you go back to the Northeast or something, it's a whole different story.
Oh, yeah. I had a really hard time when I visited DC for that very reason. My hair just would not dry.
Oh God, it's awful. And it is. I mean, I know they say this, but it never forget. DC was literally built on swampland that they didn't want. That's why they gave it up for the capital.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So the humidity is quite astonishing. Yeah, it's very different.
Oh yeah. Well, let me see, because I had notes on this, and I feel like they kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like they're still very somewhat relevant despite their tangential nature.
It's all right. So I do I'll tweet those out after the episode drops, of course.
Okay.
And I will tag you in those, and
right.
You can see. Now sometimes the answers align perfectly with what the guest and the listeners sort of align. Sometimes they don't. So
yeah,
we'll see. I think I think you're going to be totally right there with that Romulan thing. Everyone's going to pick the cloaking device, but hey, sometimes
that's the one that's had the most impact.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, the thing about the cloaking device is that, if you get caught with your cloak, you're pretty much sunk, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, it is what it is. Boom diggity, we're done.
All right, I'll stop my local recording.
No, keep it going.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
For now, just for now, because I just want to go over a couple things with you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we hit it all. Is there anything that we failed to cover that you want to make sure we get in there? I
don't think so.
Okay, because I always do a heavy edit. So if there's something you wanted to say that we didn't talk about, we can put it back in.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that that we missed per se. I think it's all been covered.
All right, great. Well, it's always important to me that my guests have a good experience on the show.
Right, so I appreciate that.
No, and I really appreciate you coming on. It's a little weird doing this because I'm sending like blind DMs to people, sometimes, and sometimes people are like, don't DM me because that's creepy, and it's like, hey, I'm inviting you on a Star Trek podcast, it's all good.
Yeah, and I normally I keep my DMs closed to people. I like if we're not mutual followers, then you can't DM me. But if you're a mutual follower, clearly I've given you some kind of consent to contact me. So it's like, whatever, DM me away.
All right, cool. Because what I try to do is it's really important to me to highlight lots of different kinds of fans.
Right.
And yeah, I really I have not had on some really hardcore STO people. So I'm really appreciative. But I gotta say, I still find it weird because, like, in Everquest, like I'm part of the high end game in Everquest right now, and in the high end game, you have to have like 50 plus people logged in to do an objective.
Wow.
Yeah. So like the guild I'm in, we play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, 5:30 Pacific, right? Like everybody logs in, and we have our own point system.
Wow.
For how much if you don't log in, you don't get points.
Oh my gosh.
And then if we accomplish the objective, there's loot that you can bid on.
Oh, wow.
Using the points that you've earned for showing up.
Dang.
So that's cool. How you improve your character. Like there's things you can buy in the game that can help you, but you can't really buy like these kinds of items. The best stuff in the game you only get by doing the high-end raids. Trying to, defeat some monster and then there's like achievements that go along with those.
Right.
Like, don't just accomplish the objective, but accomplish the objective without anybody dying. Well, then there's an achievement for that. Or defeat the objective within a certain time limit. Or, these other monsters that spawn halfway, like, don't let any of them attack anybody. Like, there's ways to shut them down, So there's like... There's so much content in the game, it's like preposterous because they've been making this thing for 22 years now, 23 years.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It's psychotic. But that's the whole point of the game is like you have to get all these people together. So that's the thing about STO that struck me as so weird is that it just was so solitary.
Well, when I think you're telling me about your guild experience and I think about fleets in Star Trek Online, if I joined a fleet that was like that, I would just leave because they're, that's not the culture of Star Trek Online, oddly.
Yeah.
I think it was back in the day. Like, a lot of my friends played longer than I did, and I supposedly joined like right at the end of the golden age, right on the tail end. But there used to be like these task force operations where, I don't know how many of them you've played.
I never got to that level.
Okay, because there's some like you can play Borg TFOs where it's in space or it's on ground, and they used to be together where you'd play the ground half first and then you'd beam up and do the space half, or vice versa. And they really show their age now, because there's one there's this new system where it'll randomly pair you with random people and put you in a random TFO. And
wow.
It's a lot of fun until you get to this mission where it's designed for people to play over voice. And no one plays on voice in STO. No one uses the voice functionality in the game. If people are using voice, it's with their friends. And so when you're in this random instance, you're not going to be able to do it. And you have to like frantically chat while you're button mashing and killing the Borg. And it is so, if you're with even like, if the majority of the team has no idea what they're doing in the first half, you just leave, because you're not going to make it. It's not going to end well. You're going to be in there for 2 hours and you're just going to hate everything.
Wow, it's such a different experience. I'm interested to talk about this, because this is like a really different MMO. Because like in EverQuest, you can play sort of the group game at the high level, which means like because every character has a certain role. Like you can be a fighting class, a melee class, a damage per second class. You can be a healer. You can be a caster type. Because it's swords and sorcery type stuff.
Nice.
But like you need like a healer and a tank and like a DPS and like a caster, like base. And there's subsets of within those. Right. But like and you can go do like stuff like with like 5 or 6 people. But then if you want to step up, like there's missions you can do. Right, which are kind of like these particular objectives, or then you can get into the raid game that requires guilds. But like you don't have to do any of that stuff. You don't have to join those kinds of guilds that do that. You can stick to this other stuff, or you can even do trade skills, which is like a bag of hurt. Where it's like people try to make stuff, and it's like this thing where you're just hitting like combine these 5 things to make another thing, and if you win, you can go into the bazaar and sell stuff. Like there's ways to sell your player made stuff.
Wow, nice.
For in-game currency, and so there's people that like have these trader characters that they do, and there's a whole game out there for that. But it's not for me, but it's definitely different. So I was interested. I don't know. I might give it another try.
And if you need people to play with, you've got me. There's plenty of other people in the Star Trek Online community who are happy to play with people who not necessarily noobs. I hate to use that word, but
no, I'm still very noob at it. Yeah, I feel like I am.
Well, Star Trek Online, it took me years to have a good ship build, and now I've got several that I love. I'm really pleased with. They're really, really high end, but I didn't get there on my own. Oh, sure. I have friends who, they were like the OG shipbuilders back in the day and helped me out, but I'm not trying to top DPS charts or anything either. So I feel like there's a happy medium between, being able to play well but not necessarily going overboard, just enough that you can play the missions and play the TFOs without, someone screaming at you in team chat.
Yeah, there's this, there's some of that too in EverQuest. Like there's people who do log parses. And they're like literally looking to see like, okay, who's top of the parse, and like I play a healing class. Like my character will never be on a damage parse because like I don't do any, right? Yeah. But like there's heal parses, which because of the way the log files don't capture everything. So like heal parses are kind of bullshit, Yeah. So but it's
similar in STO as well. Like I play a heal. I have a healing ship, and I'd like to think it's one of the strongest in the game. But people think that healing rolls are not necessary because if you've got high enough damage, you can just, brute force your way through everything. And I'm like,
no,
that's not how I want to play.
Yeah. Well, in the game I play, like, you literally do need the right mix of players.
I like that.
Like, like I said, like for a raid, the max on a raid is 54 players.
Wow.
And you need like 50 players to do some of these things, like especially for the current content. Like you can go back to the older stuff that's lower level and just kind of brute force it, because your characters are super, it's not tuned for your level. But like the current stuff, if it's 5:30 and it's playtime and I don't log on and like 6 of the other healing classes don't log on, those other people are not doing anything.
Yeah.
You literally cannot. You literally cannot. Right.
That's actually kind of neat. In a very restrictive way.
Well, what happens is people start calling, right? And they'll like get texts, and they're like, "Hey, man, you logging in?" And like, "What's going on?" So it's a thing because they can't do anything unless like the right groups show up.
Wow.
So everybody, like, people like want to do like the sexy classes, and be like the warrior tank at the top of the DPS chart. But you'll never get there unless you've got the other players that are doing things for you.
Oh
right?
yeah. I try to tell that to my friends who are hardcore into DPS and STO. It's like, you can make yourself as glassy as you want. And, we refer to glass cannon ships. It's like they get hit and they just shatter into a million pieces and explode. If you have a healer on your team, you're invincible almost. And you have way more, you can divert all your attention to DPS. Yeah. But if you want to just ignore us healers, go ahead at your own peril. But, don't say I didn't tell you so.
So how, I'm all for respect for the healing classes, because that's what I do. All right. But how essential is it in STO to pay to play the game?
That's a question that I've kind of grappled with a lot. Because for the longest time, I never spent a dime on the game. And there was a point where it was the Delta Rising arc where we got to go to the Delta Quadrant and basically relive Voyager.
Nice.
And I had a really hard time with my free stuff. And as soon as I got, a paid ship, like a T5 at that point, one of my friends got it for me. I did a little bit better. I mean, part of it was the build. And I know that now, like, you can do a lot of good things for free. You just have to know how, which that's not always like readily available knowledge, especially if you're a player like I was. And so, a lot of the really good ships, you do have to pay for. And, right now they're doing the legendary bundles, which I don't like the model at all. I don't like
what
that
is
you
it?
have. So there are these collections of ships. The best example is the 2020 bundle. Every Enterprise class basically revisited and revamped and made, bigger and badder. And you get access to all of them and, some other goodies for like $250, which...
American dollars?
Yes. See, and the look on your face is exactly my reaction.
$250?
Yeah.
Holy hell.
I think that's the base price. And often, they give it out on sale. Like, it's not available. You can't just go and buy it whenever you want. It has to be available in one of the windows that they make it available. And I think, like, when it first came out, it was like half off. And there was a Zen charge bonus, which made it more like, 75% off, I think. Like, you'd only have to pay for 75% to get the whole thing. But yeah, I don't like it. And they've been doing it more lately. Like, the 2021 bundle is two Federation ships and 2 Klingon ships. I think the Federation ships, it's the Ambassador and the Excelsior, if I'm not mistaken. And I
nice
can't
ships.
remember the Klingon ships. I'm not a Klingon player at all. It's not as expensive, but it's still too rich for my blood. And they are exclusive to whether you want to pay that amount, which I can't.
Yeah.
I got the 2020 bundle recently-ish through the, really grateful friends that I have. They, pooled together and helped me buy it, but there's no way I would have bought that on my own. I mean,
that's shocking. That's a lot of money.
It is. And especially like I got my lifetime subscription last year for their 10th anniversary. They had a huge 50% off sale, and I don't think they do that very often for the LTS. So I snagged it while I could, and I'm grateful that I did. But that was like,
so you can subscribe.
You can. And the benefits to that, you get a few exclusive ships, you get a few exclusive races that you can play. You get a Zen stipend, you get like 500 a month, which is like roughly the equivalent of 5 USD. And so if you let that accumulate over time, you can buy ships and stuff. And, Yeah,
EverQuest has the same thing. It's called Daybreak Cash, DBC.
Yeah.
You get a loyalty bonus every month. And then what I really love is that when you go to claim, you have to claim it, right? Because it says your bonus will be effective on the 1st or whatever, right? So on the 1st, you're going to hit claim, and then it immediately brings up a window and gives you an offer and says, here's something you can buy for 500, like what you just got. But it only lasts for 10 minutes or until you close this window, or they give you a deal basically, and you can buy it or not, and you're like, oh, but sometimes it's a really good deal. Like you can buy like an experience potion that'll give you like an XP boost for 4 hours, which is like that's cool, So, but like none of that stuff actually helps you like with the game, it's just like you'll get XP faster, or you can buy like a really big backpack that holds more stuff, but there's stuff like that. But it's not going to make your character better, in a way. But
well, and I feel like another big aspect to this is STO does give out a lot for free or as if free. And that's kind of a point of contention with a lot of players is like, if you play the events, you'll get ships. And people say, that doesn't mean that they're free. They shouldn't call them free ships because you have to play the game. And it's like, well, why else are you playing the game? Like, you want to play the game. You might as well play it. I mean, you want the stuff, but you don't want to play the game? That logic is just lost on me. And
that doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, and so there's a big event campaign right now, like, it's a meta event, what they call it. So it's 5 different events. And the first one I just finished, and so there's 4 more to go. There's rewards for each submission or sub-event. But the ultimate reward is, I think you can pick between one promo box, which is like, they're like lock boxes, but even worse.
Oh, it's like a loot box. You don't know what's in it till you open it.
Yeah. And, people spend hundreds of dollars to get like the one ship, like the Inquiry class, like the Zhengha, or I can't remember how it's pronounced in Picard.
The one at the end? Okay.
The mass-produced one, I really disagree with that one being in a promo box, because La Sirena is in the promo box as well, because it's a unique ship. But the mass-produced Starfleet ship is also in the unique box. But I won't get into that. But you can pick between one of those super exclusive ships. I think you can also get, instead of that, coupons to get 2 free tier 6 ships from the Zen store, which, you're not going to get La Sirena or anything like super exclusive like that. You can get like the Vesta, the tier 6 version of the Vesta class, or whatever other tier 6 ships you want to get that are in the store. And then there's also low-buy crystals are also a currency, and you can get some other exclusive ships through low-buy. But, you have to play every 5 or all 5 of those submissions. And, they give out ships for the summer and winter events. Like winter, they have Q's Winter Wonderland, which is really cute. The summer event, you go to Ryza, and you can...
Oh, nice.
The ship from 2 years ago, it's like a race ship, kind of. I can't remember the class for the life of me right now, but it's like a racing ship. It's so cool.
Remember we were talking during the podcast, we were talking about, just limiting yourself to the 4 corners of the screen?
Uh-huh.
Right? Here's one for you. Ryza canonically sucks.
Yeah.
everyone who goes to Risa has a bad time and bad stuff happens, with the exception of Hoshi in Enterprise.
Yeah.
She's the only one who had a nice time. Everybody else, like, bad stuff happened. People are like, oh, Risa, it's amazing. Really? Are you sure? Because, like, have you watched the show? Because it's not.
Oh, my God. Yeah, and Star Trek Online paints it as, it's like a paradise, and it's really pretty. I like it, but, I mean, there were years past where, I couldn't stay out of Risa. I spent my whole summer in there, and the past few years I've been like, yeah, it's there. Okay, I'm gonna go do something else now. Which I think that's just a testament to, me as a player and how my play style and preferences and priorities have changed. I feel like I'm very much at endgame. So, true endgame for me is Space Barbie, taking pictures of ships and making them pretty.
Yeah, no, you do a lot of that. So is that actually what you're doing? Is you're taking screenshots and then what are you doing? You're bringing them in a Photoshop and then dressing them up, or?
Yeah, well, it's a little more complicated than that, because so there is a program within the game itself called Demo Record, and the developers use it to make it's similar to the cutscene program that they use to make cutscenes, and they'll also use it to take their own screenshots and videos, and that's how, like my friend Zeph Films, he makes his videos through the same Demo Record thing. So
okay, what
it is, it's like you record your gameplay in the game itself, and it records everything that happens. And when you save it and you go and there's a special way that you can go back through the files and launch the demo file into the game. It plays back exactly what you recorded, but you have the ability to change the camera and move the camera around in ways that you can't in the main game. And that's the major strength to it. And
yeah. It's spinning the camera around, yeah.
Being able to do that, I mean, it's great. And the thing is, a Demo Record is like, they say it's mostly unsupported by the developers, and it is. There have been times where it's broken, and they've fixed it for us, and we've been very grateful. So if any developers are listening to this, thank you so much. And it's not very user-friendly. There's not really a guide, like, here's how to use Demo Record. It's like, good luck. And so I've written my own guide. I think Zeph Films has his own videos on a guide as well. But using it for screenshots, there's a really specific order of operations that I use. There's a certain way, if you take a screenshot of a ship, you can get the background to go away. So I don't have to go into Photoshop and like meticulously outline the ship.
Yeah, paint out the pixels and stuff.
Yeah, I used to do that and it was horrible. So now I can just do everything by composite, and it's great.
So you just drop in that model into whatever background you want, and off you go.
I mean, I try to keep the background, like, say I'm in a certain system and I have my ship there, like the background is green. There's kind of a green light on the ship, so if I were to drop it onto a purple background, it would be a little incongruent. And so I try to just keep the background the same, or if that's not possible, if I end up not liking the lighting, but I don't want to go back and re-record something, I'll just, whip out the Photoshop knowledge. But, I try to not do that. I try to keep it honest to the game and honest to how the game portrays the ships. Because, I don't know, it gets into like this weird territory where sometimes I wonder if I might as well just get into 3D modeling and, develop these pictures myself. So that's where I try to make it specific to Star Trek Online, specific to how the game is. It just, the only difference is I portray the ships in ways that you can't see in game as easily. There are commands that you can use in the chat to change your field of view and whatnot, but it's not the same.
Yeah, it's limited. I remember that part, yeah, because I was flying around in my little Romulan bird of prey.
You feel all tiny.
Yeah, I know. And I would see these other ships flying around and I'm like, is that a player? Is that a person? Or what is that? Like I couldn't really I wasn't at the point where it actually mattered for what I was doing. So it was a little weird. I mean, I found the space battle stuff and like moving around, that was probably the hardest part of the game for me.
Oh, it's jarring.
Yeah, it was really hard to manage. You know, I felt like I needed like a different kind of controller than a mouse and a keyboard or something to make sense of it. I don't know.
Yeah, you get used to it, but it took a lot of getting used to for me. I can definitely say that. So you're not alone there.